I remember a season in New York when the simplest sound could tighten my chest. The soft thud of the morning post on the floor, the shuffle of paper as I reached for it, the quiet, ordinary rustle of an envelope being opened. To most, it was nothing. To me, it felt like a verdict, because I believed another demand was coming, another reminder, another number that seemed heavier than my hope, and I would stand there, letter in hand, already deciding what it meant, already feeling the pressure before I even read the words. I did not know then that I was not reading paper. I was reading my own imagination made visible. I had been taught, as many are, that the way out was effort. More planning, more strain, more pushing. If I could only force life into behaving, if I could only work longer, worry harder, think faster, then perhaps the burden would lift. But the burden did not lift. It only grew more familiar. And what is most tragic is this. I did not merely suffer the pressure. I worshipped it. I gave it my attention, my emotion, my nights. I carried it to bed as though it were a sacred object, and I fell asleep rehearsing it as if I were preparing tomorrow's fate. Then, one night, quiet, unremarkable to any observer, I learned something that changed my entire world. It was not a new opportunity. It was not a sudden windfall. It was not a man knocking at my door with good news. It was a simple inward discovery. I discovered that it was not effort that moved the world. It was not strain. It was not the desperate tightening of the mind. It was the opposite. It was rest. It was relaxation, not as escape, not as laziness, not as resignation, but as authority. It was allowing. And when I say allowing, I do not mean waiting with a wounded heart. I do not mean perhaps someday. I do not mean giving up your desire and calling it wisdom. I mean something far more daring. I mean the quiet acceptance that the thing is already done. I mean entering a state so complete, so inwardly finished, that the world must conform to it in its own appointed way. I mean the kind of relaxation you feel when you lock the door at night and you know it is secure. You do not stand there turning the handle 100 times. You do not keep checking the lock with trembling fingers. You lock it and you walk away. That is allowing, and I tell you, my friend, it is the most misunderstood secret in all of this teaching. People hear the words, relax, and they think it means to forget. They hear, allow, and they think it means to sit helplessly under circumstance. But I am speaking of a relaxation that is born from knowing, a softness that comes only after you have claimed your desire inwardly, a letting go that is not surrender to life, but surrender to your own fulfilled assumption. For the moment you assume the end, truly assume it, there is a natural stillness that follows. It is the stillness of completion. It is the Sabbath spoken of in Scripture. It is the sign that you are no longer praying as one who lacks, but resting as one who has received. And if you can learn to relax in that manner, not because you are tired, but because you are certain, then even what you called impossible begins to behave like something ordinary. Not because the world suddenly became kind, but because you ceased to command it with fear. You see, most people do not realize that tension is not simply a feeling. Tension is a confession. It is a silent statement that says, it is not done, it is not mine. I am not safe, I must force it. And the world, being nothing more than your consciousness objectified, echoes that confession back to you as delay, struggle, resistance, and more reasons to tighten. It becomes a vicious circle. A man strains because he feels powerless. He feels powerless because he strains. And all the while, the doorway is waiting. Quietly, patiently. Because the doorway is not on the street outside. It is not in the hands of other people. It is not locked behind circumstances. The doorway is within you. And it opens when you do something so simple that the rational mind will almost reject it out of pride. It opens when you stop wrestling. It opens when you stop begging the outer world to change. It opens when you move inwardly into the feeling of being already what you wish to be. And then, having moved into that state, you relax, not as a man who has failed, but as one who has finished. Now listen to me carefully, Because I am going to speak to you, as one speaks in the quiet hours, when the mind is tender and the heart is open. If you are listening to this in the evening, or if you intend to let these words carry you into sleep, then you are doing something very wise, without even knowing it. For there is a reason I speak of relaxation, and allowing when the subject is manifestation. It is because the borderland of sleep is the most fertile field in your entire day. It is the hour when the senses grow dim, and the mind's arguments soften, and the subconscious, the faithful builder, stands open. And what you feel as you drift toward sleep does not remain a private mood. It becomes a seed, and every seed must bear fruit after its kind. I do not say this as poetry, I say it as law. Many have tried to change their lives by force in the daylight. They affirm with tight jaws. They visualize with anxious hearts. They speak words of wealth while feeling lack. They demand results while secretly fearing disappointment. And then they wonder why nothing changes. They do not know that the subconscious does not take orders from your lips. It takes orders from your state. It does not obey the words you repeat mechanically. It obeys the reality you accept emotionally. So when I tell you to relax, I am not giving you a comfort. I am giving you the key, because relaxation is the moment the command becomes believable. Relaxation is the moment you stop pushing the desire away into the future. Relaxation is the moment you stop confessing, not yet. And in that soft surrender, you finally allow the wish to be fulfilled within you. Now, I remember the very night I discovered this, I had been turning things over in my mind, like stones in my hand, counting, measuring, worrying. I had been trying to figure out my freedom, as though freedom were a puzzle to solve, and suddenly it occurred to me, so quietly, so simply, that all my effort was not proof of strength, it was proof of disbelief. For if I truly believed the matter were done, I would not be straining, I would be resting. So I did something I had never done before. I stopped the mental argument. I did not try to persuade myself with 100 sentences. I did not bargain with God as though God were outside me. I did not plead with life. I simply lay down and I asked myself one question. What would I feel if this were already settled? Not how would it happen? Not when would it happen? Not who would do it? Only, what would I feel if it were done? And I let that question sink into me like warm water. At first, the mind resisted. It offered me images of bills, of obligations, of past disappointments. It tried to pull me back into the familiar state of pressure, but I refused to wrestle. I did not fight the thoughts. I did not argue with them. I simply returned to the feeling I was seeking. And I found it just a small flicker at first, a deep exhale, a loosening in the shoulders, a softening in the belly, the sense of being held rather than hunted, the relief of completion. And as that feeling grew, something strange happened. The world did not change in that moment, but I changed. And that change was the beginning of everything. Because the moment I truly entered the feeling of done, a quiet authority settled over me. I was no longer trying to be free. I was free. Not in the world of shadows, perhaps not yet in the world of visible facts, but free where it matters first. Free in consciousness. Free in the only place where anything is ever created. And then, naturally, almost inevitably, I relaxed. Not because I had lost hope, but because I had found certainty. That night, I slept differently. I did not sleep as a debtor trying to become solvent. I slept as a man whose accounts were already balanced. I did not sleep as one waiting for rescue. I slept as one who had already been delivered. And I tell you, from that point forward, my world began to rearrange itself with an obedience that would have astonished the Neville of earlier years. It did not always happen in the manner my reason would have chosen. It did not always come with drama. Often it came so naturally that only later did I realize I was walking through the very bridge of incidents that my imaginal act had set in motion. But it came. And that is why I speak to you now, because there are those listening who have been tightening their minds for years. You have been carrying the weight of impossible like a stone in your chest. You have been thinking that if you could just hold it harder, squeeze it more tightly, control it more perfectly, then perhaps it would yield. But the impossible does not yield to force. The impossible yields to assumption. And assumption becomes powerful when you stop straining and start allowing. Now I do not ask you to take this on faith alone. I ask you to test it tonight if you will. You can begin. Not with a long ritual, not with elaborate scenes, not with frantic repetition, but with one gentle inward movement. You will feel the end. You will accept it as real for a moment. And then you will relax into it as though you were resting on a truth that cannot fail. Do you hear me? Relaxation is not what you do because you are tired. It is what you do because you are finished. And when you can relax in that way, you will discover that allowing is not waiting. Allowing is receiving. It is the inner yes that makes the seed take root. And then, in time, the outer world must echo what you have accepted within. Now stay with me. I will not give you a cold theory. I will give you the state. I will show you how to enter it gently, how to remain in it without strain, and how to fall asleep in possession of your desire. And at the close, I will give you a very simple phrase, like a seal, so that you may drift into sleep with the quiet feeling that it is already done. For when you sleep in that feeling, you are no longer hoping, you are planting, and what you plant in the stillness of night, you will harvest in the light of day. I am called Neville Goddard. I was born on a small island, and I came to New York as a young man. Not with great riches, not with powerful connections, but with a hunger, an unspoken hunger, to understand why some lives seem to open like flowers, while others remain clenched in struggle. In those years, the world around me was loud with fear and pressure. Men spoke of scarcity as though it were a law of nature. Women carried invisible burdens, quietly enduring what they believed could not be changed. And everywhere I looked, I saw the same pattern repeating itself, people trying to force life to give them what they wanted, while feeling inwardly that they did not deserve it, or could not have it, or must suffer first to earn it. I did not begin by calling this a teaching. At first, it was simply an observation. I watched the mind. I watched my own mind most carefully. I noticed that what a man called circumstance was often nothing more than a faithful mirror. It reflected not his outer actions, but his inner state. It gave back to him, in flesh and fact, the mood he carried in secret. And when I began to speak of imagination, it was not to entertain people with pleasant fancies. It was to show them the cause of their world. For I am not a man who asks you to believe in something you cannot test. I ask you to test it. I ask you to prove it. Because this is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of law. And the law is simple, though it overturns the whole habit of the world. Your imagination creates the reality you live in. Not the imagination of idle daydreaming, but the imaginative act that is accepted as true. The feeling of reality, the assumption you consent to. That is the beginning of every experience. Now, when people first hear this, they often believe their problem is that they do not desire strongly enough. They say, perhaps I do not want it enough, or perhaps I need more discipline, or perhaps I must visualize longer, affirm harder, prove my worth. But I tell you, the problem is rarely lack of desire. People desire intensely. They desire relief, love, freedom, health, security. The problem is the tension with which they desire. The gripping, the clenching, the anxious reaching. That inner squeeze is not power. It is a confession of absence. It is the state of one who still believes the desire is outside of him, still distant, still dependent upon luck, time, people, and circumstance. And so, while they want, they also wait. While they pray, they also fear. While they affirm, they also doubt. And the subconscious, which is not moved by their words, but by their state, receives the deeper feeling and produces it. This is why so many fail while working so hard. They are not failing because the law does not work. They are failing because the law is working perfectly on the very state they are living in. They imagine with one hand, and with the other they strangle the seed. They ask for freedom, and then they rehearse bondage all day long. They declare wealth, and then they feel poor with every breath. They try to make it happen, and in doing so they confess that it has not happened. My friend, the law is so faithful that it will even fulfill your doubt. It will prove your fear. It will bring to life the very thing you did not want, simply because you entertained it with feeling. And this is why I speak as I do. I do not speak to excite you for a moment. I speak to move you into a state. Because if I can bring you, by words alone, into the feeling of completion, then your world must eventually echo that feeling. Now I know that some listening may be unfamiliar with my manner of speaking. It is deliberate. I speak in a certain tone because I am speaking to more than your waking reason. I am speaking to the deeper you, that quiet listener within, the one who feels, the one who receives, the one who builds your world while you sleep. And if you are listening to this as you prepare for rest, then you are in the perfect position to understand what I am about to tell you. For the nearer you come to sleep, the less you argue, the less you strain, the more receptive you become. And this is why the most powerful transformation often begins in the evening, when the day loosens its grip. Now let me make something clear. When I speak of relax and allow, I am not offering you a soothing phrase to make you feel better for a night. I am describing the secret form of living in the end, because people hear living in the end, and they imagine it means to pretend, to act, to force themselves into cheerfulness. But living in the end is not forced cheer. It is not bright denial. It is not gritting the teeth and repeating sentences while your heart trembles. Living in the end is the inward acceptance that the end is already here. And when you truly accept that, you do not strain. You relax naturally, effortlessly, not because you have become careless, but because you have become certain. You see, the proof of living in the end is not excitement. It is peace. It is the quiet ease of possession. It is the feeling you have when a matter is settled and there is nothing left to discuss. That is allowing. Allowing is not waiting with empty hands. Allowing is resting with full hands, in imagination. And because imagination is the only cause, what is held inwardly must be reflected outwardly. I have met countless people who do not understand this, and so they try to do the work from strain. They think the law requires effort, the way the world requires effort. They approach imagination as though it were another form of labor. But imagination is not labor. Imagination is acceptance. And acceptance feels like relaxation. It feels like letting go. It feels like, of course. It feels like the simple naturalness of something that belongs to you. So if you have been trying to force your manifestation, if you have been counting days, watching for signs, tightening around your desire, fearing that a single doubt has ruined everything, listen to me. Nothing is ruined. But you must stop doing violence to your own seed. You must stop gripping the throat of your desire. You must stop chasing the outer world for permission to feel secure. You must do the opposite. You must enter the feeling first, and then you must allow that feeling to be true. You must relax into it the way you relax into your own name. Now, why does this matter today? Because the world in every age teaches the same false lesson. It teaches that you must fight for everything, that you must prove your worth by strain, that peace is something you earn after you succeed, that rest is something you deserve only after the burden is lifted. But that is the order of the world, not the order of the law. The law reverses it completely. You rest first, you accept first, you feel the end first, and then the world must rearrange to match. If you feel secure, you will see security. If you feel loved, you will meet love. If you feel free, life will express freedom. You are not waiting for the world to give you permission to relax. You are relaxing because you have already claimed the end within yourself. And the moment you truly do this, something remarkable begins to happen. The old urgency falls away. The desperate need to make it happen dissolves. You stop fighting shadows. You stop arguing with reflections. And for the first time, you become still enough to hear the quiet truth of your own being. That truth is always the same. I am. And whatever you attach to that, whatever you consent to as true, becomes the world you walk through. So my purpose in speaking is not to entertain you, and not to persuade you with cleverness. My purpose is to lead you gently, steadily, into the state where even the impossible feels natural. Not because you have hypnotized yourself, not because you have ignored the world, but because you have finally stopped confessing not yet and begun living in the feeling of already. Now remain with me. In the next part, I will tear away the great myth that keeps people bound, the myth that the impossible requires struggle, and I will show you why the very act of straining is the thing that delays your desire. Because you cannot receive with a clenched hand. You cannot allow with a tightened heart. But when you relax correctly, when you relax as one who has already received, then what you called impossible begins, quietly, to bow. There is a myth that has ruled the minds of men for so long that most never question it. They accept it, the way they accept the weather. They say, of course, the difficult thing requires more effort. Of course, the impossible demands greater struggle. Of course, I must fight, push, strain, and sacrifice. And because they accept it, they live in it. It becomes their world. This myth is not new. It is as old as man's fear. The world teaches you from childhood that you conquer by force, that you earn by toil, that you prove yourself by suffering, that the greater the desire, the greater the pressure must be. And so, when a person hears of a possibility beyond his present means, he tightens. He plans harder. He worries more. He clutches at the future like a drowning man clutches at air. He calls it responsibility. He calls it determination. But I tell you, most of the time, it is not determination. It is confession. It is the quiet statement, spoken not with the lips, but with the nerves and the breath, that says, I do not have it. The struggle is not proof of power. It is proof of absence. Now listen closely, because this is where the whole thing turns. The world tells you, the impossible requires more effort. But I have watched the law for too long to be fooled by that appearance. I have seen men labor with all their strength and remain bound. And I have seen others, who appeared to do almost nothing outwardly, step into what the world called impossible. What was the difference? Not luck, not education, not circumstance. The difference was state. One lived in the state of striving, the other lived in the state of having. One confessed absence every day through anxiety. The other accepted fulfillment every night through feeling. You see, the law is not impressed by your sweat. It is impressed by your assumption. And the assumption you hold quietly, persistently, becomes your facts. So when you struggle, you are not simply working hard. You are declaring. You are declaring. It is not done. You are declaring. It is far away. You are declaring. It is difficult for someone like me. And because the world is yourself pushed out, it cannot do anything but echo that declaration back to you as delay, difficulty, and distance. This is why I say the struggle becomes the confession, and the confession becomes the facts. The tragedy is that people do not realize they are praying by the way they tense. They are praying by the way they worry. They are praying by the way they react. They think prayer is only what they say in a quiet moment, but prayer is your constant inner attitude, your continuous mood, your habitual feeling about life. That is the prayer that never stops. And if your prayer is strain, then you are praying for more reasons to strain. Now I know this sounds strange to the natural mind, because the natural mind has been trained to believe that effort is the only lever that moves life. But I am not denying the value of action in its proper place. I am telling you that action is never the cause. Action follows state. And when the state is correct, the action becomes effortless, natural, almost automatic. It feels like being carried. But when the state is wrong, action becomes labor, and labor becomes a life. Most people mistake the effect for the cause. They say, if I can only work harder, then I will finally feel secure. But security is a feeling, and the law reverses the order. If you can only feel secure, then life will show you reasons to be secure. If you can only feel free, then freedom must appear. If you can only feel loved, then love will come. The state is the cause. The world is the echo. So let us tear this myth out by the root. The impossible does not require more struggle. The impossible requires a different assumption. It requires a different self. It requires that you stop living as the one who cannot and begin living as the one who already has. And the moment you do that inwardly, the outer world begins its reorganization. It must, because it has no choice. Now here is where the mystery deepens. What if the most powerful act of creation is not the act of pushing? What if it is the act of relaxing? Not relaxing as a man who gives up, but relaxing as a man who knows. Not relaxing because you are tired, but relaxing because it is finished. What if the calm, quiet, unforced acceptance of your fulfilled desire is more potent than 1,000 frantic efforts? I tell you, it is. Because relaxation is not merely a sensation in the body, it is a sign. It is the sign that you have moved into the end. It is the natural consequence of possession. Think of it this way. If you had already received the letter you longed for, would you be straining? If you had already been told yes, would you be anxious? If you already held the check in your hand, would you be pacing the room with fear? No, you would relax, naturally. Because the mind rests when it knows the outcome. And that is what the law asks of you. Not to wait until the world shows you the outcome, but to assume it first, to enter the rest first, to feel the end first. Then the rest becomes the evidence that you have accepted it. Now many will say, but Neville, if I relax, nothing will happen. I must do something. I must push. And I answer, if you relax as one who doubts, yes, you will drift. But if you relax as one who has already received, you have performed the act. Your relaxation is not inaction. It is completion. It is the inner posture of the Creator. For God did not strain to create the world. He spoke, and it was. He rested. The rest was not weakness. It was the sign that creation was finished. So when you relax in the right way, you are doing the same thing. You are entering the Sabbath. You are saying, without words, it is done. And the subconscious, which builds your world, receives that as instruction. It does not ask, where is the evidence? It does not demand proof. It accepts the state, and it moves the world to match. Now let me show you the contrast plainly. The man who believes the impossible requires more effort will always feel tension around the impossible. He will treat it as distant. He will speak of it as though it were for other people and perhaps not for him. Even if he says the right words, his tone will betray him. His body will betray him. His inner atmosphere will still be not yet, and so the world will remain not yet. But the man who understands the law does something entirely different. He hears of a desire that seems impossible, and instead of tightening, he softens. He turns inward. He accepts the end as real. He relaxes into the feeling of already being the one who has it. And because he relaxes, because he rests, because he no longer confesses absence, the world begins to shift. Doors open, people move, opportunities appear, not by his struggle, but by the bridge of incidents built by the subconscious. And when it comes with such naturalness that others call it luck. But he knows it as law. Now, if you are listening as you drift towards sleep, I want you to notice something very gentle. Notice how the body knows how to let go when it feels safe. The body relaxes when it trusts. The body tightens when it fears. So ask yourself honestly, what have you been doing? Have you been tightening around your desire? Have you been chasing it with anxious hands? Have you been measuring and watching and forcing and pleading? If so, then you have been feeding the state of not having, and the law has been obediently maintaining it. But tonight, you can change it. Tonight you can discover that the impossible yields not to force, but to faith, not to struggle, but to surrender. not to effort, but to assumption. And the first proof that you have assumed is that you relax. You stop pushing, you stop arguing, you stop checking. You enter into the quiet relief that would be yours if it were already done. And you let that relief be real. Now stay with me, because in the next part, I will show you exactly why the subconscious responds so perfectly to this relaxation. I will show you why the drowsy state, the state akin to sleep, is the doorway where the impossible is impressed as inevitable. And I will take you gently into that threshold. Not to give you a theory, but to give you an experience. For when you experience this even once, you will never again believe that effort is the key. You will know from within yourself that relaxation is not the absence of power. It is the highest form of power. If you would understand why relaxation is power, you must first understand what reality truly is. Because most people are living as though the outer world is the cause. They see a bill and they say, "This is the cause of my worry." They see a doctor's report and they say, "This is the cause of my fear." They hear a harsh word from another and they say, "This is the cause of my pain." They look at circumstances and they bow before them as though circumstances were gods. And because they bow, they remain bound. But I tell you, with all the certainty I have gathered through years of testing, the outer world does not initiate anything. It responds. It is an echo. It is a mirror. It is a shadow cast by an inner light. Consciousness is the only cause. And when I say consciousness, I do not mean mere thought flitting through the mind like smoke. I mean your awareness of being, your sense of I am, the invisible center within you that quietly knows itself to exist. That is the cause. Everything else is effect. This is not philosophy to comfort you. It is law, and you can prove it. Think of the simplest image, a mirror. You stand before it, and you see your reflection. If you dislike the reflection, what do you do? Do you argue with the mirror? Do you shout at it? Do you beg it to change? No sensible man would. You change your expression. You change your face, and the mirror must change its image. The mirror cannot go first. It has no power to invent a new reflection. It can only reflect what is placed before it. Now the world you call reality is exactly like that mirror. And your consciousness is the face. Your state is the expression. Your assumption is the posture you hold. And the world reflects it with mathematical fidelity. If you walk through life with the inner feeling of being unwanted, life will find 1,000 ways to show you rejection. If you walk through life feeling unsafe, the world will organize itself to confirm danger. If you feel supported, supported will appear. If you feel blessed, blessings will come. Not because life is kind or cruel, but because life is faithful. It reflects. It does not originate. I have said many times, and I will say it again here, because it must be pressed into you gently, firmly, until it becomes natural. The world is yourself pushed out, not poetically, not figuratively. Literally, the scenes of your life are the outpicturing of the states you have occupied within yourself. Now there is another image I love, because it makes this even clearer. Consider a shadow. You see it on the wall when light meets form. You cannot grab the shadow and change it. You cannot strike it and expect it to transform. It has no substance of its own. It is an effect. If you want to change the shadow, you must change the object that casts it, or change the light. The shadow follows automatically. So too with the world, it is the shadow. Your consciousness is the light. Your state is the form. Change the state, and the shadow must change. But the world has trained men to do the opposite. It has trained them to wrestle with shadows, to spend their lives pushing effects around as though effects had creative power. And what happens? They exhaust themselves. They change addresses. They change partners. They change jobs. They rearrange the surface of life again and again. Yet the same feeling returns. The same patterns return. Because the cause was never touched. The cause was always within. Now, if you are listening as you drift towards sleep, let these images sink in softly. You are not required to strain to understand. Just let the truth settle like a feather. The mirror does not initiate, it reflects. The shadow does not create, it follows. The outer world does not begin anything, it responds. Your consciousness is the only cause, and this is why relaxation matters. Because when you understand cause, you stop wasting energy on effects. You stop fighting the mirror. You stop wrestling the shadow. You turn inward, where the cause lives. And you change the only thing that can change anything, your state of consciousness. Now let me give you a small story, because the mind loves examples. A man once came to me in great distress. He was running from problem to problem like a man chased by wolves. He said, "Neville, I have tried everything. I have spoken to this person and that person. I have changed my work. I have cut expenses. I have prayed, I have struggled, and still I cannot get ahead." And as he spoke, I could feel his state, not his words, his state. He was living in the state of being trapped. He was living in the state of there is not enough. He was living in the state of life is against me. And because he lived there, the world faithfully mirrored that state as endless obstacles and delays. He wanted me to give him a plan. He wanted a new outer action. He wanted another way to fight the shadow. But I asked him something that surprised him. I said, "When you wake in the morning, before you touch the world, what do you feel you are?" He looked at me, puzzled. I said, "Do you feel yourself to be supported or to be pursued? Do you feel yourself to be safe or to be in danger? Do you feel yourself to be provided for or to be struggling?" He admitted, quietly, "I feel as though I'm always behind." And I said, "Then you are living in the end of being behind, and the world will keep giving you evidence to confirm it. You are not chasing problems, you are producing them from a state." Now he did not like that at first, because the natural mind wants to blame the world. It wants to say, "My feeling is caused by my circumstance." But the law says the opposite. Your circumstance is caused by your feeling. So I told him, "Stop running. Sit down tonight and change your state, not by force, but by assumption." I asked him to imagine a simple scene that would be true if he were already free. Not a complex drama. Just one short moment. He chose to imagine himself sitting at his kitchen table, opening the post, and feeling only ease. No dread, no tightening, just ease. He imagined himself reading a letter that said, "Your account is settled." He did not imagine the entire process of how it happened. He imagined the end, and he did something even more important. He felt the relief. He let his body soften. He let his breath slow. He let the feeling of completion become natural. And then, when he could truly feel it, he did not keep working at it. He relaxed. He fell asleep in that state. Now the outer world did not rearrange itself with lightning and thunder. It did not announce itself. But within days, what seemed impossible began to become ordinary. A small misunderstanding at his workplace was corrected, and money that had been delayed came through. A friend contacted him about an opportunity he had never considered. A payment plan he thought was rigid became flexible. And then, in what looked like coincidence to anyone else, a matter that had been pressing him for months was resolved through a channel he could not have planned. He came back to me and said, "It's as though the world softened." And I said, "The world did not soften first. You softened, and the world mirrored you." Now I want you to hear what I am truly saying. I am not telling you to do nothing. I am telling you that doing is not the cause. State is the cause. Action that flows from the right state is effortless. But action that is taken from the wrong state is struggle. One man runs after solutions with a frightened heart, and the world gives him more reasons to run. Another man changes his state quietly, and the world reorganizes itself to match his new inner posture. The difference is not the outer activity. The difference is the inner cause. And once you understand this, you begin to see your life with new eyes. You stop saying, "This happened, and therefore I feel." You begin to say, "I feel, and therefore this happens." And that shift is freedom. Because if the cause were outside you, you would be helpless. You would always be waiting for permission. You would always be at the mercy of people and events. But if consciousness is the cause, then the power is where you are, not in a distant place, not in a future day. Here, now, in you. This is why I say there is no one to change but self. Not because other people are imaginary in the shallow sense, but because the world you meet is shaped by your concept of yourself. Change the concept, and the world must change its behavior toward you. Now perhaps you are thinking, but Neville, what about the facts? What about what I can see and touch? My friend, what you can see and touch is only yesterday's consciousness made visible. It is the past. It is the harvest of former states. It is the shadow of what was. And if you judge your creative power by yesterday's shadow, you will always remain behind. The Creator does not look to the shadow for permission. The Creator changes the light. He changes the state, and then He lets the shadow catch up. So tonight, or whenever you are ready, stop arguing with effects. Stop wrestling with shadows. Stop demanding that the mirror change first. Go to the cause. Go to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Go to the quiet acceptance of already. And then, this is the key. Relax. Because when you relax, you are no longer confessing not yet, you are resting in done. And the world must respond. It cannot do otherwise. Now stay with me. In the next part, I will show you why so many people fail, even when they understand this in their minds. I will show you the hidden confession behind trying. I will show you why tension is the enemy of manifestation, and why the relaxed assumption, especially in the drowsy state before sleep, is the doorway through which the impossible becomes inevitable. Now that you have seen that consciousness is the only cause, you can begin to understand something that most never notice. They feel it every day, but they do not recognize what it means. They call it stress. They call it pressure. They call it trying. But in truth, it is a prayer. It is a continuous, living prayer. And it is not a prayer for what you want. It is a prayer for what you fear. Because tension is not neutral. Tension is the body's way of saying, it is not here. Tension is the heart's confession that says, not yet. When you tighten around your desire, you are not holding it close. You are pushing it away. For you are confessing, with your nerves and your breath, that you do not possess it now. And the subconscious, which does not reason, does not debate, does not analyze, receives that confession as fact and arranges your world to keep it consistent. This is why so many people, though sincere, though diligent, though desperate for change, remain trapped. They pray with their lips, I believe, but they pray with their bodies, I doubt. They affirm, it is done, but their stomach turns, their shoulders rise, their mind scans the horizon for danger. The deeper voice is the feeling, and tension is a feeling. So tension becomes a command. Now listen carefully. The law is not punishing you for being tense. It is simply obeying you. It is responding to the state you are living in. If you are tense, you are living in the state of still lacking, and life will keep mirroring still lacking until you change the state. This is why I say tension is a prayer of absence. It is not merely unpleasant, it is creative. It is an imaginal act, repeated over and over, day and night, that says, I do not have it. And because the outer world is only the echo, it must answer, yes, you do not have it. Now you may object, but Neville, I cannot help it. My circumstances make me tense. I understand the feeling of that. I have known it, but I tell you, the moment you accept that circumstances cause your inner state, you have surrendered your power. You have made the mirror the master. You have crowned the shadow as the cause, and from that position, you will always be a servant. But if you accept instead that your inner state is the cause, then you can change your experience regardless of what the senses report. This is not easy at first, because the habit of reacting is old, but it is simple, and everything changes when you begin to see what tension truly is. Tension is the clenched fist. It is the hand that is trying to hold, trying to force, trying to grab life and squeeze it into obedience. But a clenched fist cannot receive. It can only grasp, it can only strain. If I were to place a gift in your hand, and your hand were closed tightly, you could not take it. Not because the gift is not offered, but because the hand is not open. So it is with your desire. So it is with the impossible. The impossible is not withheld from you by some external power. It is withheld by your own inner contraction, by your refusal, often unconscious, to accept it as already done. Now, do not misunderstand me. When I speak of opening the hand, I do not mean passivity. I do not mean surrendering your desire and calling it spiritual. I do not mean sitting in resignation saying, whatever will be. That is not allowing. That is defeat. Allowing is not resignation. Allowing is assumption. Allowing is the quiet inward acceptance that the thing desired is already a fact in consciousness. And because it is a fact in consciousness, it must become a fact in the world. Allowing is the open hand that says, it is mine. Not with desperation, not with pleading, but with naturalness, with the calm of possession. Now I want you to feel this difference, not merely understand it. Imagine the difference between holding your breath and letting your breath flow. Holding your breath is effort. It is tension, it is control. It is the body saying, I cannot trust the next moment. But letting your breath flow is surrender. It is trust. It is the body saying, I am safe enough to receive air. Your desire is like that breath. When you clutch at it, you lose it. When you allow, it comes. Now let me use another image, because images can go deeper than reasoning. Think of a cup. If the cup is already filled to the brim with muddy water, and you wish for pure water, what must happen? You cannot pour pure water into a cup that is already full. It has no space. You could pour, and the cup would overflow, and still the muddy water would remain. The cup must be emptied first. This is what tension does to you. Tension fills the cup with the muddy water of not yet. Not possible. I must force it. I might fail. And then you try to pour in peace, faith, confidence, and the feeling of fulfillment. But there is no room. So you do not receive, not because the law does not work, but because you are full of the old state. So what must you do? You must empty the cup, and you empty it not by fighting, not by straining, not by repeating words like a man trying to convince an enemy. You empty it by relaxing, by letting go of the old contraction, by allowing the body to soften, by allowing the mind to stop scanning, by allowing yourself to enter, even for a moment, the feeling of completion. Then the cup becomes available. Then the pure water can be received. Now this is why I say, permitting is not passivity. Permitting is not doing nothing. Permitting is doing the only thing that matters, changing state. It is the silent, inward shift from still lacking to already having, from I hope to I know, from when to now, from I must earn to it is given, from I am trying to I am. Do you feel the difference? If you truly allow, there is no strain. And if there is strain, you have not yet allowed. You may have wanted, you may have wished, but you have not assumed. Because assumption feels like rest. This is the mark of it. Assumption has a quietness, a settled quality, a softness. It is like the feeling you have when a debt is truly paid, not promised, not pending, paid. You do not keep checking your pocket for the money. You do not keep imagining the creditor's face. You simply live. That is the state of done. And it is that state which creates. Now let me speak to you tenderly here, because some who listen to me are harsh with themselves. They hear this, and they say, then I have ruined everything, because I have been tense. No, you have not ruined anything. You have simply been creating unconsciously, and now you are being given the chance to create consciously. There is no condemnation in this teaching. There is only revelation. The moment you see the cause, you can change it. The moment you recognize tension as prayer, you can choose a different prayer. And that different prayer is not a long speech. It is a feeling. It is the feeling of relief, the feeling of safety, the feeling of already being held. Now, because this is meant to be listened to as you sleep, I want you to notice something. The nearer you come to sleep, the more the body naturally relaxes. The fist begins to open, the cup begins to empty, the guard of the conscious mind begins to soften, and that is why the hours near sleep are so sacred. Because nature itself begins to do for you what you struggle to do in the daylight. It begins to relax you. It begins to open you. It begins to make room. So the question becomes, what will you place in that open space? What will you pour into that emptied cup? Most people pour in worry. They pour in fear. They pour in not yet. They lie down and they rehearse the absence. They think they are being responsible, but they are planting. And then they wake and wonder why life repeats. But you can do something different. You can use the natural relaxation of sleep as your doorway into allowance. You can take the open hand of the drowsy state and place the gift in it. You can take the emptied cup of the relaxed mind and pour into it the feeling of fulfilled desire. And then, because the subconscious accepts what you feel as true, the world must mirror it. Now, perhaps you are wondering, how do I stop being tense? How do I open the fist? I will show you. But not by giving you a harsh discipline, not by making you fight your own mind. I will show you by guiding you into a different feeling. Because the fist does not open by force. It opens when it feels safe. It opens when it trusts. It opens when the need to grasp disappears. So in the next part, I will take you into the very secret of that safety. I will show you how to enter the state where the desire feels already accomplished. I will show you how to let the body relax, not as a trick, but as a natural response to inner completion. And you will see for yourself that when the hand opens, the gift arrives. When the cup empties, the water is received. When you relax and allow, even what you called impossible begins to manifest as though it were simply the next natural thing. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when a man begins to change. It does not always happen when the money arrives. It does not always happen when the letter comes with good news. It does not always happen when the doctor smiles and says, "You are well." No. Often the real change begins before any of that. It begins in you. It begins as a softness, a loosening, the shift so gentle that you might miss it if you were not paying attention. And yet, once it happens, everything that follows seems to rearrange itself as though an unseen hand were moving pieces on a board. First comes the peace. Not the peace that depends on conditions, but the peace that comes when you have ceased to argue with conditions. It is the peace of inner completion, the peace of a man who has in consciousness already arrived. You may still be in the same room. You may still have the same outward facts for the moment, but something in you has changed. And because the world is yourself pushed out, the world must soon reflect what has changed within. This peace is unmistakable. It feels like the body has finally been given permission to rest. It is as though a weight you did not know you were carrying is suddenly set down. The breathing deepens. The eyes soften. The heart no longer races ahead of itself. And for the first time, you are not living as... And now, having tasted the fragrance of that peace, I will bring you to the way it is entered. Not as a set of cold instructions, not as a mechanical routine, but as an inward art, so simple, so natural, that once you learn it, you will wonder how you ever lived without it. There is a sacred interval in every day, a doorway you pass through whether you know it or not. You pass through it at night, when the day loosens its grip. You pass through it when the body grows heavy, when the limbs soften, when the breath slows, and the sharp edges of thought begin to dissolve. Most people stumble through this doorway unconsciously. They drag their worries with them. They carry their arguments, their fears, their debts, their disappointments. They let the last thing they feel be the feeling of struggle. And then they wonder why tomorrow resembles yesterday. But the one who knows the law treats that interval as holy ground. Not because he is superstitious, but because he understands that the mind, in that softened hour, is impressionable. It receives, it absorbs, it accepts. So if you would learn to relax and allow, you must learn to enter that interval deliberately, with the end already in your heart. This is not an act of forcing sleep. It is the opposite. It is the art of letting go into a chosen feeling. Let me speak to you as though I were sitting beside you in the quiet of evening. For that is how this is best understood. When you are ready to rest, do not rush into sleep as one fleeing the day. Enter it as one entering a temple. Not a temple of stone, but a temple of consciousness. Lie down in whatever manner is natural to you. Let the body find its comfort. Do not strain for a perfect position. The body knows how to rest, and the more you trust it, the sooner it becomes still. Now begin to notice the small places where you hold yourself. The jaw, the brow, the shoulders, the belly. There are knots you have tied without knowing it. Little contractions of fear and effort. And as you become aware of them, you need not fight them. Simply allow them to soften, as though warm water were being poured through you, as though the breath itself were loosening the cords. The breath is your first ally, because the breath is the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious. When the breath is high and tight, the mind is on guard. When the breath is slow and low, the mind begins to surrender. So let your breathing descend, not by force, simply by permission. Inhale gently, as though you are receiving something kind. Exhale softly, as though you are letting go of a burden you no longer need to carry. Let the exhale be slightly longer than the inhale, and you will feel the body begin to follow. The limbs grow heavy, the hands lose their grip, the face becomes smooth, and the mind, so busy in the daylight, begins to soften like wax near a flame. Thoughts will still come. Do not be troubled. Thoughts are like visitors at the door. You do not have to invite them in. You do not have to wrestle them out. You can simply let them pass. And as you do, you will notice that the mind becomes less sharp, less argumentative. It begins to drift, not into unconsciousness, but into a gentler kind of awareness. This is the doorway. It is neither full waking nor full sleep. It is that tender borderland where the imagination becomes more vivid and the senses become less commanding. You can feel it when it comes. The body feels as though it could sink an inch deeper into the bed. The eyes feel soft behind the lids. The world outside seems further away, and the inner world seems nearer. This is the state I speak of so often, though I do not wish to make it sound technical. I only wish you to recognize it, for you have known it all your life. You have simply not used it consciously. In this softened state, you do not try to imagine. You allow a scene to rise, and the scene you choose is not complicated. It is not a long story. It is not a grand performance. It is one simple moment that would be true if your desire were already fulfilled. A moment that implies the end. If your desire is freedom, you might imagine the feeling of waking with no weight on your chest. If your desire is supply, you might imagine paying a bill with ease and feeling nothing but calm. If your desire is love, you might imagine the warmth of a hand in yours and the quiet certainty of being chosen. Do you see? You do not imagine how you imagine done, and you do not watch it from a distance as though it were a picture on a wall. You enter it, you become the one who is living it. If you imagine holding a letter, feel the paper between your fingers. If you imagine hearing a voice, hear it with the intimacy of reality, as though it were in the room. If you imagine a room, see it from within your own eyes, not as a spectator, but as the participant. And here is the secret that makes it all work. You do not force emotion. You allow the natural feeling of the scene to arise. If the scene implies relief, let relief come. If it implies gratitude, let gratitude come. If it implies joy, let joy come. Even if it comes gently at first, like the first light of dawn, you nurture it by continuing to live the scene, not in strain, not in a frantic effort to make it real, but in the quiet acceptance that it is real within you now. Because in imagination it is, and imagination is the only cause. Now you may wonder, Neville, what if the mind wanders? What if I lose the scene? Let it wander. Let it drift. Bring it back softly, as you would guide a child back to bed, without scolding, without force. And each time you return, you are strengthening the state. You are teaching the subconscious what is to be accepted. And you will find that the scene begins to take on the tones of reality. It begins to feel less like something you are doing, and more like something that is happening. You might feel your body respond. A sigh, a smile, a warmth, a loosening. That is not imagination being childish. That is imagination becoming flesh within you. That is the seed being pressed into the soil. Now here is something most people do wrong. They think they must hold the scene for a long time. They think they must repeat it endlessly, as though repetition alone impresses the subconscious. But the subconscious is not impressed by length. It is impressed by reality. One short scene, truly felt, is worth more than an hour of strained effort. A single moment of genuine acceptance is creation. So do not exhaust yourself. Do not turn this into labor. If you can feel the end for even a few breaths, the act is done. And then, this is where relax and allow becomes the living key. You let it go. Not by forgetting it in doubt, but by surrendering it in faith. You let the scene fade as you drift further into sleep. You allow sleep itself to carry the feeling into the depths. This is why it is so powerful. Because as the body falls asleep, the conscious mind grows quiet. The one who doubts, the one who argues, the one who measures becomes still. And the subconscious, faithful, fertile, receives the last impression you held. If the last impression is worry, it receives worry. If the last impression is completion, it receives completion. If the last impression is already, it receives already. And what it receives, it must express. So you see, the method is not a battle. It is an entering, an allowing, a gentle ritual of selecting the end, feeling it as real, and then resting. The body loosens. The breathing descends. The mind becomes soft. The desire is felt as already fulfilled. And then you sleep, not as one waiting, but as one who has received. You sleep in possession. That is the art. And it is far more powerful than most can imagine until they prove it. Now, if you are listening and you intend to sleep with these words, let them guide you naturally into that softened place. Do not strain to stay awake. Do not strain to sleep. Simply listen and let the rhythm of truth do its work. For the very act of hearing this, if it moves you into the feeling of peace, has already begun the process. In the next part, I will show you how to choose the right scene so that it carries the end perfectly, and how to know when the seed has truly been planted. Because there is a sign, always a sign, that tells you the act is complete. And when you know that sign, you will no longer fear whether you did it right. You will know quietly, confidently, that it is done. Years ago, a woman came to see me after one of my talks in Los Angeles. She did not come with the bright eagerness of curiosity. She came with the quiet desperation of someone who had been carrying a burden too long. Her face was composed, but there was a tightness around the mouth that told me she had not known true ease in some time. She spoke politely, as many do, but her voice had that thin edge that comes when a person is living under pressure. She told me she had done what people call everything. She had cut expenses. She had taken extra work when she could find it. She had asked friends for advice. She had prayed in the way she had been taught to pray, pleading upward toward a distant God, hoping for mercy. And yet the weight remained. Bills continued to arrive as faithfully as the sun, and the more she tried to manage them, the more she felt she was being managed by them. "I am tired," she said. And I could hear, in those words, a much deeper confession. Not merely tired of labor, tired of fear, tired of waiting, tired of living, as though life were always about to demand something from her. She did not ask me for philosophy. She asked me one question, and it was a question I have heard 1,000 times in different forms. How do I stop feeling trapped? Now this is important, because her question was not about money. It was about the state. The money was only the shadow. The trap was the consciousness. So I did not begin by telling her to imagine checks or numbers. I did not begin by giving her a long sentence to repeat. I asked her something far simpler. I said, "When you think of your obligations, what do you feel in your body?" She looked surprised, as though she had never thought to ask herself that. She closed her eyes for a moment and said, "I feel tight. I feel like I cannot breathe. I feel like I am holding my life together with my hands." I nodded. because she had described the very thing that keeps people bound, the clenched fist, the prayer of absence. And I said, then your first work is not to earn more. Your first work is to stop holding your world together with tension, because your tension is the state you are feeding. She looked at me as though I had spoken a strange language. You mean I should relax? She said, almost offended by the simplicity. And I said, yes, but not the way you think. Not to forget your desire, not to escape your life, but to enter the state where it is already done. That relaxation is the sign that you have received. She shook her head gently, and I could see the doubt, not doubt in me, but doubt in herself. I can't, she said. I've tried. When I relax, my mind starts shouting, and I said, then do not fight the shouting. Do not argue with it. Let it be there, like distant noise, and find one feeling beneath it. One feeling that would be yours if all were settled. She was quiet. So I continued, very gently. I said, imagine this. It is late. You are in your bed. The day is over. And suddenly you realize, truly realize, that every bill is paid, not promised. Paid. The matter is finished. What happens in your body? She swallowed, and I saw her shoulders drop slightly. She didn't answer immediately, but I could see it happening. The mind was beginning to touch the state. And then she whispered, I would breathe. Yes, I said, that breath is the beginning of your freedom. I told her, tonight, do not try to solve anything. Tonight, do not sit up in bed, calculating. Tonight, do not rehearse your problems like a prayer. Lie down and enter the feeling of that breath. Let yourself feel the relief of it is done. And when you can feel it even a little, say softly within yourself, it is finished. Then sleep. She frowned again. And that will pay my debts? She asked. I smiled. Not because I found her question foolish, but because I knew it was the question everyone asks at first. They want the outer to be the cause. They want a visible lever. They cannot imagine that the inner state is the lever. I said, I am not asking you to believe it will pay your debts. I am asking you to enter the state that implies they are already paid, because the state is the cause, and the outer must follow. She left, still unsure. Most do. But those who practice prove it. A week passed. Then another. And I did not think of her again, until one evening she returned, standing at the back of the room as I was speaking. After the lecture, she came forward. And the first thing I noticed was her face. It was not radiant in an exaggerated way. It was simply softer. The tension around the mouth was gone. Her eyes were clearer. She looked as though she had slept. She did not begin with dramatic declarations. She did not say, Neville, a miracle happened. She said quietly, something changed. That is always the sign. Something changed within. And she told me what had happened. She said she had done what I asked, though at first it felt almost impossible to stop rehearsing her worry. She lay in bed, and her mind began to race, as it always did. But instead of wrestling it, she did something new. She returned again and again to that breath, that simple feeling of release. And when she could feel it, even faintly, she whispered, it is finished. She did not repeat it like a chant. She did not force herself to be cheerful. She simply let the feeling of completion be there, like a warm blanket, and she fell asleep. She told me that after several nights of this, something strange happened. The fear in the morning was less. The mail no longer felt like a weapon. The day felt lighter. And then, without her planning, an old matter she had forgotten about resurfaced. A mistake had been made years earlier, an overpayment that had never been returned. A letter arrived, not demanding money, but offering it. A check, enough to cover what had been weighing on her most heavily. She did not tell me this with the wild excitement of someone who has won a gamble. She told me with the calm amazement of someone who recognizes law. It came so naturally, she said, it was almost ordinary. And I said, that is always how it comes. For the law does not trumpet its work. It does not announce itself with drama. It moves quietly, rearranging the ordinary events of life until the end you assumed becomes the world you live in. The impossible did not come with trumpets. It came with normality. It came as a letter in the post. It came as a forgotten record. It came through the natural channels of human life. But it came because the state had been changed. She had stopped forcefully gripping the old story. She had changed the inner climate, and the world had no choice but to reflect the new weather. Now hear this carefully, because this is the key. She did not do more. She did not chase the outcome. She did not run about desperately trying to make something happen. She did the opposite. She stopped, she softened, she entered the feeling of completion, she allowed it. And because she allowed it, the bridge of incidents formed without her effort. This is the part that the strained mind cannot understand. It insists, if I am not pushing, nothing will move. But I tell you, the moment you assume the end, everything is already moving. Not always in ways you can see, not always in ways you can predict, but moving. People are stirred, records are found, ideas arise, conversations happen, doors open, all as part of the unseen orchestration that leads to the visible fulfillment. And that is the real meaning of allowing. Allowing is not sitting helpless. Allowing is surrendering the how, while remaining faithful to the done. Allowing is the refusal to interfere with the law by anxiety. Allowing is trusting the seed after you have planted it. Now, if you have listened this far, you may feel something within you beginning to soften already. That is good. Do not rush to turn it into a mental effort. Just let it be, because this is precisely what I want to impress upon you next. The key of allowing is not the mere act of relaxing the body, though that helps. The key is the inner acceptance that produces relaxation naturally. It is the quiet shift from still trying to already received. And in the next part, I will take you deeper into that key. I will show you how to recognize when you are truly allowing and when you are merely waiting. I will show you how to stop treating your desire like a distant object and start treating it like a present fact. Because when you do, the entire world begins to obey, not with spectacle, but with the gentle inevitability of dawn. When I use the word allow, I am not speaking of a weak patience. I am not speaking of a man sitting on the edge of his chair, hoping life will someday be kind to him. I am not speaking of waiting with folded hands while the heart secretly trembles. No, I am speaking of something far more definite. Allowing is acceptance. Allowing is the inner decision that the end is present now in consciousness. Allowing is living from the accomplished fact. And if you grasp this, truly grasp it, you will stop doing the very things that keep you bound. You will stop asking. You will stop waiting. You will stop fighting. Because all three are confessions that you still do not have. Do you hear me? Asking is not innocent. Asking inwardly says, it is outside me. Waiting says, it is not now. Fighting says, it resists me. And all three are states. And the world, being the echo of state, must reflect them as an outside world, as delay and as resistance. So I say to you, if you would allow, you must abandon the posture of the beggar. And the beggar is not defined by his clothing or his bank account. The beggar is defined by his inner attitude. The beggar is the one who says, please give. The beggar is the one who says, maybe, someday. The beggar is the one who says, why won't it move? But the one who knows the law does not pray like that. He does not approach life as though life were outside him, holding his good at a distance. He recognizes that the source is within, and therefore he prays in the only way prayer ever works. He assumes, he accepts, he receives inwardly, and then he rests. That is allowing. Now let me make it plain. To allow is to accept the end as present. It is to enter the state of your fulfilled desire and dwell there, not as a visitor, but as one who lives there now. And that is what I have always meant when I speak of living in the end. Living in the end is not pretending. It is not acting for an audience. It is not forcing yourself to smile while your heart is full of fear. Living in the end is the inner shift where you stop thinking of your desire as a distant thing and start thinking from it as a present reality. You stop looking at the end as a goal. You begin looking from the end as your home. And the moment you truly do that, you naturally allow. Because the state carries with it its own emotional signature. The man who already has does not strain. He does not chase. He does not plead. He lives. And that living is the secret. Most people think the secret is in techniques, in words, in complicated inner work. But the secret is simpler. Feeling is the secret. Because feeling is the language of the subconscious. Feeling is the substance of the state. You can repeat words without believing them. You can paint pictures in the mind without accepting them. But you cannot feel a state without entering it. Feeling is entry. Feeling is union. Feeling is what makes the imaginal act real. And once it is real, it must be expressed. So allowing is not merely saying, I accept. Allowing is feeling the acceptance. It is letting the body and mind sink into the relief of already having. It is permitting yourself to experience now what you once believed could only be experienced later. This is why I say the law is reversed. The world teaches you, when the debt is gone, then you will feel relief. But the law says, feel relief, and the debt will be gone. The world teaches you, when you are loved, then you will feel secure. But the law says, feel secure and love will appear. The world teaches you, when the door opens, then you will relax. But the law says, relax, and the door will open. This is allowing. You stop bargaining with time. You stop making your peace conditional upon the outer world. You enter peace as your present state, and the outer world rearranges itself to match. Now understand me, this is not a trick to manipulate life. It is the recognition of what life is. Life is consciousness objectified. Therefore, to change life, you change consciousness. And consciousness is changed by feeling. So the moment you feel the end as present, you have changed consciousness, and in that moment, the seed is planted. Now, why is it so difficult for people to allow? Because they are loyal to appearances. They have trained themselves to bow to what the senses report. They have spent years letting the outer world dictate the inner state. And so when they try to assume something new, the old evidence shouts. It says, look, it isn't true, you are pretending. But the evidence is always old. It is yesterday's consciousness. It cannot tell you what you are creating now. It can only show you what you created before. So you must learn to ignore it, not with anger, not with denial, but with understanding. You say inwardly, this is only an echo. The cause has changed. The echo will change in its season. And you return to the feeling. You return to the end. You return to the relief. This is allowing. Allowing is not one dramatic moment. It is a quiet habit. It is the decision, again and again, to live from the fulfilled state rather than from the waiting state. And as you practice it, you will notice something wonderful. The struggle begins to fade. The desire no longer feels distant. The mind no longer fights so hard. Because the state is becoming natural. And when the state becomes natural, manifestation is inevitable. For the world cannot long remain out of harmony with what is natural to you. The outer world must become what you are. So let me give you a simple inner test. If you are still asking, you are not allowing. If you are still waiting anxiously, you are not allowing. If you are still fighting the world for signs, you are not allowing. But if you can sit quietly, even for a moment, and feel it is done, and the body softens, and the mind rests, and you can breathe as though the burden has lifted, then you are allowing. That is the state. That is living in the end. That is feeling as the secret. Now, in a moment, I will take you deeper still, because there is a subtle enemy that hides behind spiritual effort. It disguises itself as diligence. It calls itself checking, measuring, making sure. But it is the very thing that prevents allowing. It is the anxious vigilance that keeps the hand closed. And once you see it clearly, you will be free of it. There is an enemy that ruins more imaginal acts than open disbelief ever could. It is not the skeptic who laughs at the law. The skeptic, at least, is consistent. The true enemy is far more subtle. It disguises itself as wisdom. It calls itself caution. It calls itself responsibility. It calls itself making sure. But in truth, it is anxious vigilance. It is the constant checking, measuring, and verifying that betrays the fact that you have not accepted the end. And if you have not accepted the end, you have not allowed. Now I have watched men and women do this for years. They come to the teaching and they are moved. They feel hope. They imagine the end with genuine emotion. They fall asleep one night in the feeling of fulfilled desire. And the next morning, before their feet touch the floor, they begin to check. They check their mood. They check the mail. They check the bank. They check the faces of others. They check the world for signs. And every act of checking is not neutral. It is a statement. It says, I am not sure. It says, it might not be done. It says, I still need the outer world to confirm what I have not yet accepted within. And the law, being faithful, answers that state as well. It brings more waiting, more uncertainty, more reasons to check. Do you see how it perpetuates itself? This is why I say anxious vigilance is the hidden thief. It steals the seed before it can take root. It does not steal by force. It steals by interference. It keeps you in the state of not yet, even while you are speaking words of already. Now let me give you the simplest metaphor in the world, because it is perfect. A man plants a seed in the earth. He covers it, he waters it, and then he waits. Now imagine if that man was so anxious, so doubtful, that every morning he went out and dug up the seed to see if it had sprouted. He would take it out of the soil, stare at it, and say, it isn't growing. Then he would put it back, cover it again, and walk away. And the next morning, he would do it again, and again, and again. That man would never harvest anything. Not because the seed lacked life, not because the soil was barren, but because he would not allow the process. He would not trust the unseen work. He would keep disturbing the root before it could establish itself. Now your imaginal act is exactly like that seed. The subconscious is the soil. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the planting, and anxious vigilance is the digging up. Every time you say, is it working? When will it happen? Where is the sign? You are digging up the seed. You are disturbing the roots. You are pulling yourself back into the old state. Now I know the mind's argument. It says, but Neville, I must know. I must be responsible. I must plan. I am not telling you to abandon common sense in daily affairs. I am telling you to abandon the inner attitude of doubt. Planning is not the enemy. The enemy is inner checking that comes from fear. The enemy is that restless scanning, which is really a confession that you do not believe the end is true. For if you truly believed it, you would not need to check. The one who has does not check. The one who has received does not measure. The one who lives from the end does not ask, will it happen? He knows. And because he knows, he rests. This is why I say something very simple, and I want it to become a gentle truth within you. If you are checking, you are not allowing. If you are measuring, you are not living in the end. If you are searching for proof, you have not yet accepted the unseen as real. Now, do not condemn yourself if you recognize this in your own behavior. Do not say, then I have ruined everything. No, you are simply seeing what must be changed. The first step to freedom is recognition. If you have been checking, it only means you have been living in the state of uncertainty, and you can change that state now. You change it by returning to the feeling of completion and by practicing the art of leaving the seed alone. Now let me speak tenderly here, because I know what it is to feel the urge to check. It often comes from a desire to protect yourself. The mind believes that if it can monitor the world closely, it can prevent disappointment. It believes that vigilance is safety. But the law does not reward vigilance. The law rewards faith. And faith is not vigilance. Faith is rest. Faith is rest. Faith is the quiet knowledge that what has been planted must grow, not by your watching it, but by the life within it. So when the urge to check arises, treat it gently. Do not fight it like an enemy. Smile at it as you would smile at a nervous child, and say inwardly, "No need, it is done." Return to the end. Return to the relief. Return to the feeling that would be yours if it had already happened, and then continue your day as though you have already received. Now this is important. Continuing your day does not mean pretending. It means moving from a new inner posture. There is a difference. Pretending is tense. Pretending is acting. Pretending is trying to convince yourself. But living from the end is natural. It is quiet. It is simply being. So instead of checking, you cultivate an inner atmosphere. You cultivate the mood of already. You cultivate the calm certainty that the matter is finished in consciousness. And when this mood becomes stable, the urge to check begins to fade on its own. Because the need to check is the child of uncertainty. Kill uncertainty, and the child disappears. Now I will give you a small practice you can use tomorrow, because the day is often where anxious vigilance returns. In the morning, before you look at anything, before you open a letter, before you speak to anyone, take one slow breath, and as you exhale, say inwardly, "It is done," not as a ritual, as a reminder. Then, if the thought comes, "Let me see if it worked," answer it immediately. Softly, "I have already planted. I do not dig it up," and go on with your day. If you find yourself reaching for proof, pause. Feel again that relief. Even if it is only for a moment, a short moment is enough. Then continue. Do you see what you are doing? You are training your consciousness to dwell in the end rather than in the waiting. You are teaching yourself to remain in the state of possession instead of the state of lack. And because consciousness is the cause, the outer must follow. Now, if you persist in this, you will notice something remarkable. The world begins to show you signs without you seeking them. Not because you demanded them, but because you stopped interfering. The law can work cleanly when you stop pulling at it, and the signs will come quietly, naturally. A conversation, a letter, a sudden opening. But the greatest sign will be within you. It will be the calm that replaces the urge to check. That calm is the Sabbath. That calm is allowing. That calm is living in the end. Now stay with me, because once you stop digging up the seed, you will want to know what to do if doubts appear. And doubts will appear, not because you are doing it wrong, but because you are changing. The old state will try to reclaim you. The world of appearances will try to seduce you back into the old story. And I will show you how to meet that moment with mastery. Not with strain, but with stillness. Not with argument, but with a simple return to the end. There is an enemy that ruins more imaginal acts than open disbelief ever could. It is not the one who says, "I do not believe." That one at least is honest. The true enemy is the one who believes for a moment, and then begins to watch. He watches the outer world the way a man watches a clock when he is late. He watches with tightening, he watches with hunger, he watches with fear, disguised as diligence. He watches because he cannot yet bear to live without visible proof. This is anxious vigilance, and it is the hidden thief. It steals not with noise, but with repetition. It steals with the small, constant acts of checking, measuring, and verifying. And I tell you plainly, this is how most people undo their own work. They plant the seed at night, and they dig it up in the morning. They enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then they rise at dawn and look around as though the senses were the judge. They say, "I did it." And then they say, "But where is it?" They whisper, "It is done." And then they whisper, "It is not done." The tongue may speak faith, but the attitude reveals doubt, and the subconscious hears the attitude. Now I want you to see this clearly, because once you see it, you can stop it. Every time you check, you are not simply gathering information, you are making a declaration. You are declaring that the outer world is the authority. You are declaring that what you felt within is not yet real. You are declaring, "I am not sure." And because consciousness is the only cause, You remain in the state of not sure, and the world faithfully mirrors back uncertainty. This is why the one who checks often meets delay, not because the law punishes him, but because the law obeys him. It gives him exactly what his state implies: more reasons to doubt, more reasons to measure, more reasons to keep looking. Now let me give you the simplest image, because it has never failed to make this plain. A farmer plants a seed, he covers it with soil, he waters it, and then he leaves it alone. The seed does not grow by his staring at the ground. It grows in darkness. It grows in silence. It grows unseen. Now imagine a farmer who cannot bear the silence. Every morning he goes to the field and digs up the seed to see if it has sprouted. He lifts it out of the earth, holds it in his hand, and says, "It isn't growing." Then he puts it back, covers it again, walks away. And the next morning he does the same. And the next. That man will never harvest. Not because the seed has no life, but because he will not allow the life to work. He is disturbing the very thing he claims to want. He is uprooting his own creation. Now your imaginal act is the seed. The subconscious is the soil. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the planting. And anxious vigilance is the digging up. When you rise in the morning and immediately check the world for proof, you are digging. When you measure your mood all day and wonder, "Am I still in the state?" you are digging. When you count days, watch people's reactions, scan for signs, and whisper, "It should have happened by now," you are digging. You are disturbing the root, and then you wonder why the harvest seems slow. So I say it again, and I want it to become a quiet rule in you. If you are checking, you are not allowing. If you are measuring, you have not entered the Sabbath. If you are demanding proof, you have not accepted the unseen as real. Now do not misunderstand me. I am not telling you to live without awareness. I am telling you to live without doubt. There is a difference. A man can go about his daily affairs with wisdom and still rest inwardly in the end. But the anxious watcher is not wise. He is fearful. His checking is not planning. It is pleading. His measuring is not discernment. It is desperation. It is the same old confession in different clothing: "I do not have it yet." And the world answers, "Then you shall continue not to have it." Now there is a reason the mind becomes vigilant. It believes vigilance will protect you from disappointment. It believes that if it watches closely enough, it can prevent pain. But it is mistaken. Vigilance does not protect you. Vigilance binds you to the state of fear, and the state of fear can only produce fearful results. Faith, on the other hand, is not vigilance. Faith is rest. Faith is the calm knowledge that the seed is alive, that the process is underway, and that your watching is unnecessary. This is why I call it the Sabbath. In the true Sabbath, you cease from mental labor. You cease from inner struggle. You cease from the need to verify. You rest because you have accepted the end. Now, if you find yourself caught in the habit of checking, I will tell you exactly what to do, not as a dry method, but as a gentle redirection. When the urge arises, do not scold yourself. Do not panic and say, "I've ruined it." Simply stop. Pause. Take one breath. And on the exhale, return to the feeling of completion. Return to the end. Return to the relief you would feel if it were already done. Even if you can only touch it for a moment. Touch it. Then go on. You are training yourself to live in the end, rather than in the waiting. And if you repeat that simple return enough times, the urge to check begins to weaken. Because checking is fed by uncertainty. And when you replace uncertainty with the feeling of done, the watcher has nothing to feed upon. Now let me speak to you, especially if you listen as you drift towards sleep. The night is merciful. The night naturally quiets the watcher. The senses fade. The mind loses its sharpness, and the subconscious becomes open. This is why night after night, if you fall asleep in the feeling of completion, you are planting a seed that grows while you are not watching. You cannot watch while you sleep. And that is why sleep is so powerful. It forces the very thing you struggle to do in the day. It forces you to stop checking. It forces you to allow. So do not spoil this gift by returning in the morning to the old habit of anxious measurement. Instead, when you wake, let the first feeling be the same feeling you fell asleep in. Do not rush to the mirror. Do not rush to the mail. Do not rush to the evidence. Stay for a moment in the atmosphere of the end. Let the body remember the softness. Let the breath remain low. And say within yourself, quietly, it is done. Not as an affirmation to make it happen, but as a remembrance that it already has happened in consciousness. Then begin your day. And if during the day the watcher rises again, and it will at first meet it with the same gentle firmness. No need. I do not dig up the seed. I am allowing. Now there is one more thing I must tell you, because it frees the mind even more. The law often fulfills itself in ways so natural that the anxious watcher would miss it even if it were standing before him. The bridge of incidents rarely arrives as a dramatic sign. It arrives as ordinary life. A conversation, a delay, a small change, a chance meeting, a forgotten record discovered, a new idea, a door that opens quietly. If you are watching with desperation, you will not recognize the bridge, because you are looking for spectacle. But if you rest, you will walk the bridge naturally without even trying. And one day, you will look back and see that the whole path was arranged from the moment you planted the seed. This is why I say your work is not to watch the bridge being built. Your work is to remain faithful to the end. Plant the seed, leave it alone, water it with gratitude, and let the unseen do its work. If you can do this, then what you once called impossible will not only manifest, it will manifest with such normality that you will almost laugh. You will say, of course, because you will know it was never chance. It was never luck. It was never outside you. It was consciousness, your own wonderful human imagination, accepted as true and allowed to become fact. Now, in the next part, I will show you how to deal with the moment when the senses protest, when the old world shouts, when doubt tries to reclaim you, not by fighting it, but by a deeper form of allowing, an inner firmness so calm that the outer world must eventually bow. Here is the strongest turn you will make in your entire practice, and it feels at first like a secret you once knew and somehow forgot. Your desire does not need your tension. It does not need your strain. It does not need your anxious labor. It needs something far quieter. It needs your acceptance. It needs your naturalness. It needs your rest. Now the world will protest when it hears this, because the world has trained you to believe that desire is a burden you must carry until it becomes real. You have been taught that if you let go, you will lose it. That if you relax, it will slip away. That if you stop trying, nothing will happen. But that is only because you have confused tension with power. Tension is not power. Tension is absence. Tension is the secret cry, I do not have it. And because the law is faithful, that cry becomes your experience. So I say to you now, stop feeding your desire with the poison of strain. Your desire is not a heavy stone you must drag uphill. It is a seed, and a seed does not grow faster because you grip it. A seed grows because it is planted, covered, and left alone in the quiet darkness of the soil. Your desire grows in the same way. It grows when you accept it as true in consciousness. It grows when you allow it to feel natural. It grows when you rest. Now let me speak to the part of you that is afraid to rest, because that fear is common. It says, if I stop tensing, I will become careless. No. When you stop tensing, you become precise, because you stop wasting your power on effects. You stop bleeding energy into worry. You stop throwing your attention into the same old story. Rest is not carelessness. Rest is the sign that the creative act has been done. The very moment you accept the end, you have done what needs to be done. What remains is unfolding. So your desire does not need your struggle. It needs your consent. It needs you to say inwardly, yes, this is mine. Not as a desperate hope, as a settled fact. And this settled fact has a feeling tone. It feels like relief. It feels like ease. It feels like quiet confidence. It feels like something ordinary. That is the part most do not understand. The fulfilled desire feels ordinary. It does not feel like a constant thrill. It does not feel like frantic excitement. It feels natural. It feels like your own name. And because it feels natural, you do not fight for it. You do not chase it. You do not keep measuring it. You simply live in it. This is the forgotten secret. The world tries to excite you into belief, but excitement is unstable. It rises and falls. It needs constant stimulation. But naturalness is steady. Naturalness is the state that remains when the mind is no longer trying to convince itself. Naturalness is the end. So I tell you, the sign that you have truly accepted your desire is that you feel no need to force it. You feel no need to speak of it constantly. You feel no need to defend it. You feel no need to prove it. You have the quiet composure of someone who already possesses. And that composure, that ease, is what calls it forth. Now you may ask, but Neville, how can I feel natural about something I have never experienced? You do it the same way the actor does it. You enter the role inwardly until it becomes familiar. Not by strain, by repetition. In the state akin to sleep, you return night after night to the feeling of the end, and each night it becomes more normal. It becomes less like imagining and more like remembering. And when it becomes remembrance, it begins to harden into fact. This is why I say your desire needs your acceptance. Acceptance is not forcing yourself to agree with a lie. Acceptance is consenting to a reality that already exists in imagination. Because in imagination, all things are complete now. There is no future in imagination. There is only the present. So when you accept the end as present, you are not pretending. You are entering the only realm where creation begins. And then, because creation must express itself, the outer world follows. Now I will tell you something that may shock you if you are still in the habit of effort. The more you stop tightening around your desire, the faster it often comes. Not always instantly, but cleanly. Because you have removed the interference. You have stopped digging up the seed. You have stopped sending mixed signals. You have ceased praying, not yet, while speaking. Already. Rest is not delay. Rest accelerates, because rest is faith, and faith is the atmosphere in which the seed grows. So if you have been struggling, if you have been trying to hold the feeling with clenched teeth, if you have been forcing yourself to imagine correctly, listen to me. Your desire is not asking you for that. It is asking you for something simpler. It is asking you to become the one who already has it. And the one who already has it is not tense. He is at ease. He is not pleading. He is grateful. He is not watching. He is living. He is not striving. He is resting. So tonight and tomorrow and the next day, practice this inner pivot. Instead of saying, I must make this happen, say, it is already done. Instead of saying, I have to keep control, say, I allow the law to fulfill itself. Instead of saying, I must hold on tightly, say, I accept it as mine, and I rest. And when you say it, feel the softness come, feel the breath come, feel the shoulders drop. That physical easing is not separate from the imaginal act, it is the evidence of the state. Now this is why this segment is so powerful, because it frees you from the exhausting belief that you must carry your desire like a burden. You do not. You carry it like a gift already received. You carry it like a secret already true. You carry it like a ring on your finger. You do not keep touching the ring to see if it is real. You simply wear it. That is naturalness. And naturalness is the creative command. Now in the next part, I will bring this into an even deeper practice. I will show you how to make the feeling of naturalness so strong at night that you fall asleep in it without effort. I will show you how to let the body become the ally of your assumption. And I will give you a simple inner sentence, a seal that you can carry into sleep, so that the last impression upon your subconscious is not longing but fulfillment. Now we come to the central practice, the one so simple that the proud mind will want to dismiss it, and yet so powerful that if you do it rightly, you will never again call anything impossible. It is the whisper before sleep, not the whisper of desperation, not the whisper of pleading, but the whisper of finality, the whisper that belongs to one who has already received. You see, The last moments before you sleep are not merely the end of a day. They are the beginning of creation. They are the open door, the softened gate, the sacred interval when the outer senses grow dim and the inner. And now, if you truly wish to allow the future to be different, you must become willing to loosen your grip on the past, because there is a kind of holding that most do not recognize. They think they have released yesterday, but they carry it in the form of identity. They carry it in the way they speak to themselves. They carry it in the way their body tightens when a certain memory rises. They carry it like an anchor tied to the ankle, and then they wonder why they cannot sail into a new life. You cannot allow the new while you cling to the old as truth. You cannot relax into abundance while you secretly rehearse failure as your story. You cannot accept the end as present if your mind keeps returning to scenes that declare you unworthy, defeated, or bound. This is why I tell you of revision, not as a clever trick, not as a mental game, but as liberation. Revision is the act of removing the anchor. It is the inward decision that you will no longer permit the old scene to define you. Because the past is not a fixed thing sitting behind you in time. The past lives now as memory. And memory is imagination. And imagination is the only reality. So if the past lives in imagination, then the past can be changed in imagination. And what is changed, there must change here. Most men do not realize that they are revising constantly, but in the wrong direction. They revise in favor of pain. They take a scene that happened in the day, a harsh word, a humiliation, a failure, and then at night they replay it. They improve it in their mind, not by healing it, but by deepening it. They say inwardly, I should have said this, and they imagine themselves losing again. They rehearse the shame. They rehearse the anger. They rehearse the helplessness. And every rehearsal is a new planting. Every replay is a fresh seed. So the old event does not die. It is kept alive by the feeling you keep giving it. And because you keep giving it feeling, it keeps bearing fruit in your present. That is the tragedy. People think they are remembering, but they are creating. Now let me tell you a short story, because stories make the law visible. A man came to me who could not seem to move forward in life. Every new opportunity slipped from his hands. Every new relationship fell into the same pattern. Every attempt at prosperity ended in the same discouragement. And he said, Neville, I try to imagine a better future, but something in me will not relax. I asked him, what is it you cannot stop remembering? And after a long pause, he told me. Years earlier, he had been humiliated publicly in his work. A mistake was blamed on him that was not truly his fault. But in that moment, under the eyes of others, he felt small. He felt judged. He felt powerless. And the scene had burned itself into him. He carried it like a mark, not on the skin, but on the soul. Now notice what happened. The event itself was over, but the state was not. He had kept the state alive by replaying it, by telling himself the story again, by using it as evidence of who he was. And because he identified with it, he could not allow something new. He could not accept a new end, because the old end was still being lived inwardly. So I said to him, tonight you will revise it. He looked at me as though I were asking him to change history. And in truth, I was, but not in the way the world thinks of history. I was asking him to change the only history that matters, the history that lives in consciousness. I told him, go back to that scene, see it as it was, and then rewrite it. He said, how? I said, hear different words, see different faces, feel a different outcome. I asked him to imagine that the man who had blamed him instead placed a hand on his shoulder and said, I was wrong. It was not your fault. You have done well. I asked him to imagine the eyes of others, not with contempt, but with respect. I asked him to feel the warmth of dignity instead of the cold of shame. And I told him, do not do this as a spectator. Enter it, live it, repeat it until it feels natural, until the sting leaves your body. He did it reluctantly at first, because pain feels honest, shame feels true. But truth is not what happened. Truth is what you accept. And if you accept a new scene, the law must make it your truth. After several nights, something began to change, not in the outer world yet. In him, his shoulders began to loosen. He stopped bracing for judgment. His voice became steadier. And then, as law would have it, the outer world began to mirror the revised state. People treated him differently. Not because they suddenly became kinder on their own, but because he was no longer wearing the old garment. He was not projecting the state of being condemned. He had revised the inner cause, and the outer effect followed. Now, understand what revision truly does. It does not merely make you feel better. It changes the seed. And when you change the seed, you change the harvest. You release yourself from the identity of the old scene. You stop being the one who failed, the one who was rejected, the one who was humiliated, the one who could not pay, the one who was not chosen. You stop living as that self, and only then can you truly allow the new. Because as long as you secretly cherish the old story as who I am, you cannot relax into a new assumption. You can try to imagine wealth, but the old memory says, I am the one who loses. You can try to imagine love, but the old scene says, I am the one who is left. You can try to imagine freedom, but the old history says, I am the one who is trapped. So revision is the act of letting the old identity die. It is the act of saying, that is not my story anymore, and not by convincing yourself with argument, but by giving your imagination a new scene to live. Now let me speak very practically, because you will take this into the night. At the end of the day, when you lie down and the mind begins to drift, you will naturally review the day. Most do it unconsciously. They replay what hurt them. They replay what went wrong. They rehearse what they fear. But you will not. You will gently take the scene that did not please you, and you will change it. If there was an argument, you will hear the words of reconciliation. If there was a failure, you will see yourself succeeding. If there was a harsh letter, you will see the letter softened, corrected, resolved. If there was a bill that frightened you, you will see it stamped paid in full, and you will feel the relief. You will not do it as an empty exercise. You will do it until the feeling changes. Because the feeling is the secret. When the feeling changes, the cause changes. And when the cause changes, life changes. This is how you release the anchor. And once the anchor is released, allowing becomes easy. Because you are no longer trying to step into a new future while dragging an old self behind you. You are free to be new. You are free to accept. You are free to rest. Now do not think you must revise everything at once. One scene at a time, one memory at a time, one feeling at a time. Revision is gentle, but it is powerful. It is like loosening knots that have been tied for years. As each knot loosens, the body relaxes, the mind softens, the heart becomes able to believe again. And that belief, the simple natural acceptance, is allowing. So tonight, if there is something in you that keeps returning, a humiliation, a failure, a regret, do not fight it. Do not condemn yourself for remembering. Simply revise it. Give it a new ending. Give yourself a new identity in that scene. And then, having revised the past, you will find it far easier to allow the future. Because you will not be holding the old world as your truth. You will be holding the new world as your home. Now, in the next part, we will gather everything together. The whisper before sleep, the feeling of completion, the refusal to check, the release of the past, and we will bring you into a closing so calm and so final that you can drift into sleep with the sense that it is already done. Once you have entered the state at night, once you have whispered the end and felt it as real, there is a simple, quiet guardianship that must follow in the day. Not harsh discipline, not strain, not a grim policing of every thought as though you were fighting yourself. No, it is more like tending a flame. You do not blow on it with panic. You do not smother it with fear. You simply protect it from the winds that would extinguish it. This is what I mean when I speak of the mental diet. It is not a list of rules. It is the natural care you give to a new assumption, the way you would shield a tender seedling until it is strong enough to stand on its own. Because the allowing you entered at night can be disturbed in the day, not by the world, but by your own careless return to the old language, the old declarations, the old confessions, the old inner conversations that say, it cannot be done. So I tell you now, as gently as I can and as firmly as I must, watch your words. Not merely the words you speak to others, though those matter. Watch the words you speak to yourself when no one hears. The little phrases you mutter under your breath, the silent commentary running beneath your day. Because that inner speech is the constant prayer, and it will either protect the state you entered or it will undo it. Most people, after a beautiful night of imagining, rise in the morning and immediately begin to speak as beggars again. They look at the same outer evidence and they renew the old story. They say, nothing has changed. They say, I don't see it yet. They say, it's impossible for me. And in those sentences, they have taken their own seed and crushed it between their fingers. They have not allowed it to grow. They have contradicted it. And the subconscious, faithful servant that it is, accepts the contradiction and begins to outpicture the old state once more. So you must become aware of your own language, not to become tense, but to become free. For to speak wrongly is not a sin in the moral sense. It is simply unwise. It is like pouring poison into your own cup and then wondering why you feel ill. If you have declared, it is finished, then do not spend the day saying, it is not finished. If you have assumed, all is well, then do not spend the day rehearsing disaster. If you have whispered, I am joined to the fulfilled state, then do not go about repeating, I am trapped, I am unlucky, I am always behind. Every I am is a seed, every it is a decree, and you are decreeing all day long whether you know it or not. So let your speech become the natural continuation of your allowing. Do not speak like a beggar. A beggar is not defined by money. A beggar is defined by inner posture. The beggar says, if only. The beggar says, maybe someday. The beggar says, I hope I can. The beggar says, I never get. That language is a confession of absence. And absence confessed and felt becomes fact. But the one who allows speaks differently. He does not boast. He does not shout. He simply lives in the assumption. He speaks from the end. So when the thought arises in the day, what if it doesn't happen? Answer it softly. It is finished. When the mind wants to complain, this is too hard. Answer, all is well. When the old habit tries to declare, it can't be done, stop it mid-sentence and replace it with a simple truth. I am. Not I am trying. Not I am hoping. Just I am. And then join it to what you have accepted. I am secure. I am provided for. I am free. You do not have to repeat these endlessly. You are not trying to persuade the universe. You are guarding your own state. You are refusing to feed the old world. Now understand this. The outer world will tempt you. It will present you with remnants of the former state, because it is the echo of yesterday. A bill may arrive. A delay may appear. Someone may speak as though nothing has changed, and the old reflex will be to react, to tighten, to declare the old story again. But this is the moment of mastery. This is where allowing is protected. You do not deny the letter. You do not pretend you cannot read. You simply refuse to let it determine your inner state. You say inwardly, this is only the echo. The cause has changed. And then you return to your chosen feeling. You return to your quiet breath. You return to your end. You do not argue with appearances, because arguing is still giving them power. You simply move through them as through mist, knowing that mist cannot stop the sun. Now, I have often said that you must be faithful to your inner act. Faithful does not mean tense. Faithful does not mean obsessive. Faithful means consistent. It means you do not go back to declaring impossibility. Because every time you declare impossibility, you are using the creative power of the word to build a wall. You are speaking as though the door is locked, and then you wonder why it remains locked. So I say to you now, Never again speak of your desire as impossible. Never again speak of yourself as an exception. Never again speak as though life is against you. Those are old prayers, those are old states, those are old garments. You have outgrown them. You are learning to allow, and allowing speaks a different language. Allowing says, it is done. Allowing says, it is finished. Allowing says, all is well. Allowing says, I am. And the most powerful part of this is not the words themselves. It is the feeling behind them. When you say, all is well, let your shoulders soften as though it truly were. When you whisper, it is finished, let your belly relax as though the burden is gone. When you say, I am, let it feel like presence, like stability, like a pillar within you that cannot be shaken by letters, numbers, or opinions. Now, I do not mean that you will never have a fearful thought. Thoughts may come, memories may rise, but you do not have to eat every thought that is offered to you. That is why I call it a diet. You choose what you consume, you choose what you entertain. So when the old thought comes, you always fail. You do not sit with it like a guest. You do not rehearse it. You do not argue with it, because argument still gives it energy. You simply replace it with the truth of your chosen state. I am successful. I am favored. I am guided. All is well, and you move on. Now the effect of this becomes astonishing, because as you keep the mental diet, the new state becomes natural. It begins to feel like your true home. You stop slipping back into the old world, because the old world begins to feel foreign. You notice that the old complaints do not taste the way they once did. The old fears feel heavier than before, not because they have grown stronger, but because you have grown lighter. And that is a beautiful sign. It means you are changing. It means you are no longer comfortable in the old state. It means the new life is becoming real. And the more real it becomes inwardly, the more inevitable it becomes outwardly. So treat your day as the garden. Your thoughts are seeds. Your words are water. Your feelings are sunlight. If you water fear, fear grows. If you water peace, peace grows. If you water impossibility, walls appear. If you water completion, doors open. So be gentle, but be watchful. Not anxious vigilance. No, we have left that behind. But quiet guardianship. The kind that simply remembers. The kind that catches the old phrase before it escapes your lips and turns it into a new decree. Now, as we approach the final portion of this journey, I will gather these phrases into one soft closing, so that you can drift into sleep with the mind protected, the heart quiet, the past revised, the day's diet cleansed, and the last impression upon your subconscious one of complete, finished fulfillment. Now let us speak of the word that has frightened humanity more than any other: impossible. Men whisper it the way children whisper of monsters in the dark. They say, that is impossible for me. They say, that cannot happen. They say, it is too late. And in those words they do not merely describe a condition, they decree a boundary. They draw a line in consciousness and then live their lives within the small enclosure they have created. But I tell you, in the law, the word impossible has no meaning of its own. It is not a fact of life. It is not a fixed wall in the universe. It is simply a habit. It is an old persistence. It is yesterday's assumption repeated until it became familiar, and then mistaken for truth. That is what impossibility is. It is the old fact, meaning the old out picture combined with the old persistence. You look at what has been, you persist in believing it must continue, and then you name that persistence impossible. But it is not impossible. It is only habitual. It is only the mirror repeating what it has been shown. So I say it to you as plainly as I can. The impossible is only a custom of the mirror, a habit of reflection, a stubborn echo of an old state. The mirror is not wise. The mirror is not powerful. The mirror is obedient. It reflects whatever stands before it. If you have stood before life for years with the face of limitation, life has reflected limitation, and you have called that reflection reality. But the moment you change the face, the mirror must change the image. It may not change instantly to your eyes, because the world of facts has inertia, but change it must. So when you say impossible, what are you really saying? You are saying, I have seen the same reflection so long that I cannot imagine a different one. That is all. And the cure is not struggle. The cure is imagination. For imagination is not the ability to daydream. Imagination is the creative act. It is God. So when you dare to imagine differently, you have already broken the spell of impossibility. Because impossibility is a spell cast by repetition. And every spell is broken by a new word, a new assumption, and a new persistence. Now this is why I tell you again and again, do not judge by appearances. Appearances are old, they are yesterday's harvest, they are not the measure of what is now being planted. If you call something impossible, because the outer world has not yet changed, you are making the old harvest your authority. You are bowing to the mirror, and you are refusing to accept that consciousness is the only cause. But if you accept that consciousness is cause, then nothing is impossible. Because consciousness can occupy any state, and any state occupied must express itself. Now you may say, Neville, but some things truly are impossible. Listen to me carefully. Nothing is impossible to the subconscious. The subconscious does not know odds. It does not know social rules. It does not know the past. It does not know what men call facts. It knows only what is impressed upon it as reality. If you impress upon it the feeling of the wish fulfilled, it must build the bridge that leads to that fulfillment. And that bridge is what the world calls coincidence. But it is not coincidence. It is the bridge of incidence. It is the rearrangement of seemingly ordinary events into a path so perfect that when you arrive at the end, you will look back and see it could not have happened any other way. Now this is where many stumble, because they do not understand the bridge. They assume the end at night. They feel it real, they whisper, it is done. And then life begins to move. But the movement often looks strange. It does not always look like blessing at first. Sometimes it looks like disruption. Sometimes it looks like a door closing. Sometimes it looks like delay. Sometimes it looks like something falling apart. And because they do not understand the bridge, they panic. They say, it is failing. And in that panic, they abandon the end. They return to the old state. They call the bridge impossible, and they stop walking. But I tell you, the bridge is never your enemy. The bridge is the law in motion. It is the unseen intelligence of your own deeper mind, arranging the route. And that route may require the old structure to dissolve so that a new structure can appear. Let me give you a story that I have shared in different forms over the years, because it illustrates this perfectly. A man desired a different life. He wanted freedom from constant financial strain. He wanted to leave a certain position that kept him bound. He came to me and said, Neville, I want a new post, better pay, peace of mind, but I see no way. I told him what I tell you. Assume the end. He went home, and each night he fell asleep, feeling the satisfaction of being in his new work. He did not imagine the interviews, or the letters, or the struggle. He imagined the end. He imagined himself walking into a new place, with ease. He imagined shaking hands with a friend who said, this is exactly right for you. He felt the relief of freedom, and he slept in that feeling. Now within a short time something happened. He was dismissed from his current position. To the outer mind, it looked like disaster. He came to me frightened. He said, Neville, it's gone the wrong way. I've lost my work. I've ruined everything. And I said, no. You are watching the bridge being built and calling it collapse. He did not understand. So I said, if you remain faithful to the end, you will see that this dismissal is not punishment. It is movement. It is the first plank of the bridge. He went home, and that night he did not change his imaginal act. He did not imagine himself crawling back into the old job. He did not imagine panic. He imagined the end again. He whispered, all is well. He fell asleep in that calm. Within weeks, through a chain of contacts and events, He could never have arranged consciously. He was offered a position far better than the one he had lost. Better pay, better hours, better atmosphere. And when it came so naturally that he almost forgot the dismissal ever frightened him. He looked back and he said, "If I had not been dismissed, I would never have been free to take this new place." And I said, "Exactly." The bridge of incidents often begins with something the old self calls bad, but the new self recognizes as necessary. Do you see now why impossible is an illusion? Because the mind looks at one moment and calls it final. It looks at one closed door and calls the whole house sealed. But the law sees the entire chain. It knows the route. It knows what must move, who must be stirred, what must be released, what must be rearranged. And when you assume the end, you set that chain in motion. So you must stop judging the movement. You must stop calling the bridge a problem. You must stop declaring impossibility simply because the path does not match your expectations. For the subconscious is wiser than your expectations. It may deliver your desire by a route you would never choose, and yet it will always be the perfect route. Now think of how freeing this is. You do not have to build the bridge. You do not have to design it. You do not have to force people. You do not have to manipulate events. Your only work is to remain faithful to the end, to relax and allow, to rest in the state of fulfilled desire, to stop calling the unknown impossible, to stop naming the bridge failure, and to remember that everything is moving, even when it looks still, even when it looks backwards, even when it looks strange. The bridge is often built in silence. And by the time you realize you have crossed it, you are already at the end. This is why I say the impossible is only an old habit of the mirror. You have simply been standing in the same state too long. Change the state, and the mirror must change. Then what was called impossible becomes ordinary. It arrives not with thunder, but with normal life. A letter, a call, a meeting, a coincidence too precise to be chance. And you will know that it was never impossible at all. It was only unfamiliar. Now we are very near the close of this journey, and because you listen with the intention to sleep, I will gather these truths into a final, gentle sealing. A closing that will carry you down into rest, with a single feeling it is done. And from that rest, the law will do what it always does. It will make your assumption flesh. There is one more trap I must pull into the light, because it steals the peace of many who have almost learned to allow. It is the obsession with the channel. It is the habit of choosing the how. The mind will accept, for a moment, that the end may be possible. It will even accept that imagination creates reality. But then it does something subtle. It says, very well, but it must happen in this way. And the moment you demand the way, you have left the end. You have stepped out of allowing and returned to control. And control, when it is anxious, is simply fear wearing a respectable suit. Now I understand why men do this. They believe they will feel safe if they can see the path. They believe certainty is in the method. They believe peace is found by knowing the steps. But I tell you, peace is not found in knowing the bridge before it appears. Peace is found in knowing the end is done. The bridge is not your concern. It never was. It cannot be. Because the bridge is built by an intelligence deeper than your reasoning mind. The bridge is the work of the subconscious. The bridge is the law itself arranging the means to its own fulfillment. So your work is never the how. Your work is the end. Hold the end. Rest in the end. Sleep in the end. Live from the end. And let the law select the way. This is where true allowing becomes pure. Because to allow is to let the end be enough. To allow is to say inwardly, I do not need to dictate the channel, for I am not the one who designs the bridge. And this demands humility. Not humility before men, but humility before the law. It is the humility of a farmer who plants and trusts the soil. He does not crawl into the earth to arrange the roots. He does not command the sun to rise sooner. He does not attempt to pull the stalk upward by hand. He plants, he waters, and he waits in confidence. He knows the law of growth is already at work. So it must be with you. You plant the end, you water it with feeling, and you let it grow in its own perfect manner. Now the one who chooses the how does something very dangerous. He makes his peace conditional. He says, I will relax when it comes through this door. I will believe when I see it arrive by this person. I will feel safe when the money appears in this form. And by making peace conditional, he postpones the very state that would bring the fulfillment. He remains in tension. He remains in waiting. He remains in the prayer of absence. And then he wonders why nothing moves. But the law cannot move you out of a state you keep returning to. So I say to you, stop choosing the how. Not because you should be careless, but because you should be wise. Your conscious mind is too small to design the route. It can choose the state, yes. It can consent to the end, yes. But it cannot see the hidden connections, the unseen impulses, the strange stirrings in men and circumstances that the subconscious can orchestrate without effort. So if you insist on the how, you may blind yourself to the fulfillment when it comes by another route. And this happens constantly. A man imagines wealth and insists it must come by a particular job. When that job does not appear, he declares failure. But wealth was coming through a friend, through a settlement, through a sudden opportunity he did not yet know existed. He missed it because he was watching the wrong door. Another imagines reconciliation and insists the other must call first. When no call comes, she feels rejected again. But reconciliation was unfolding through a chance meeting, through a softened heart, through a letter that would have come if she had remained faithful to the end. She missed it because she tried to write the script for the actors. And I tell you, you cannot direct the actors. You can only change the state. When you change the state, the actors move. When you fix the end, the world finds a way. So the wise person says, I do not care by what channel it comes. Notice, this is not indifference. It is faith. It is the quiet certainty that if the end is accepted, the means are already contained within it. The seed contains the tree. The end contains the bridge. You do not have to invent the bridge. It is already implied. So let it unfold. Now there is a phrase I have used many times because it captures this perfectly. Dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and leave the means to the law. That is the entire art. You assume the end. You feel it real. You relax into its naturalness. You stop asking how. Because how is not your business. How is the business of the subconscious, the divine intelligence within you. Your business is the state. Now you may ask, but Neville, how can I stop asking how? You stop by returning to the feeling. The question how is born from discomfort. If you truly feel the end, you naturally stop asking how. For when you are satisfied within, you no longer chase explanations. You simply know. So whenever how rises, treat it like the old watcher. Smile gently and return to the end. Say inwardly, all is well. Say it is done, and feel again the relief of completion. That relief is the sign you have stepped out of the how and back into the end. Now I will give you a picture to carry into sleep tonight. Imagine you are standing in a house with many doors. Your desire is outside, on its way to you. You do not know which door it will enter. If you stand anxiously at one door, staring, you may miss it entering through another. But if you sit calmly in the center of the house, resting in the feeling that it is already yours, then no matter which door it enters, you will receive it. That is living in the end. You are no longer stationed at one channel. You are dwelling in the possession of the thing itself. And because you dwell there, the world must deliver. Now this is one of the great freedoms of allowing you no longer have to figure out life. You no longer have to manipulate people. You no longer have to plan every step. You only have to accept the end. Then you live, and life arranges itself. The bridge appears beneath your feet. You take the next natural step, and the next, and the next, and then one day you look up and realize you have arrived, and you cannot even say precisely how, because it felt like life. It felt ordinary. It felt natural. And that is always the signature of the law. When the law fulfills, it does not feel like magic. It feels like inevitability. Now as we move into the closing, I want you to carry this with you. Do not choose the how. Choose the end. Do not choose the channel. Choose the state. Do not demand the bridge. Demand only the feeling, and then relax. Allow, sleep, and let the law do what it was born to do. Make your assumption flesh. Now let me lift your eyes for a moment, very gently, because I do not want you to think that this teaching is merely a tool for collecting things. Yes, the law will give you things. Yes, it will change circumstances. Yes, it will bring money, health, reconciliation, opportunity, doors opening where there were walls, and you should use it. You should prove it. You should not be ashamed to desire comfort, beauty, freedom, and ease. These are natural desires, and the law is yours to employ. But hear me well. These things, as wonderful as they are shadows. They are garments. They are the outer shapes that life takes when a state has been assumed. They are not the cause, and they are not the final prize. For there is something deeper that begins to awaken in you the more you practice this law faithfully. At first you come to the teaching because you want to change your world. You want relief. You want a better condition. You want the impossible to bend. And you discover that it does. You discover that the world is far more pliable than you were taught. You discover that life responds not to effort, but to state. And you begin to feel a quiet reverence, not for the outer results, but for the power that produced them. You begin to sense that there is something in you that is not merely human in the limited way you once believed. You begin to recognize that the operant power is not outside you. It is within you. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the emphasis changes. You still enjoy the fruits of the law, but you begin to want something more fundamental. Not merely to have, but to be. Not merely to arrange shadows, but to know the light that casts them. For every manifestation, no matter how great, is temporary. Money comes, money goes. Positions change. Bodies pass through seasons. Relationships transform. Even the most splendid circumstance is still a circumstance, still a garment that consciousness wears for a time. And if you cling to garments as though they were the substance, you will always fear losing them. But when you begin to know the substance, fear begins to die, because you realize the source cannot be exhausted. You realize you are not dependent on any outer thing. You realize the power that brought the result can bring another and another. And then you begin to taste a freedom that is not based on conditions, a freedom that is inward, a freedom that does not tremble when the world shifts. This is the beginning of what I have called the promise. Now I will not turn this into a heavy sermon, because that is not my way, but I must tell you, because it is part of the truth. The law is the schoolmaster. It teaches you by demonstration that imagination creates reality. It trains you to trust the unseen. It educates you out of the superstition of the senses. It proves to you that consciousness is the only cause. But the promise is something else. The promise is not primarily about getting. It is about awakening. It is about discovering, not as a theory, but as an experience, that the I am within you is God. Not a God in the sky, not a distant deity to be feared, but the very awareness that is reading these words, hearing this voice, breathing through this body, that silent sense of being. Before you add a name, before you add a story, this is the I am. And when you begin to sense this deeply, you realize that the world you have been trying to change is not separate from you at all. You realize it is yourself pushed out. You realize the whole drama of life is the one I am wearing masks, playing parts, moving through states, awakening through experience. And then the manifestations, though still pleasant, become secondary. Not because you despise them, but because you see them for what they are, reflections. You begin to value the inner knowing more than the outer proof. You begin to feel that the greatest miracle is not the thing that arrives, but the awareness that creates it. Now this is why I tell you that relaxing and allowing is not only a method for receiving, it is also a doorway into being. Because the moment you truly relax, The moment you truly cease from mental labor, you touch the I am. You touch that still center in yourself that does not strain, that does not beg, that does not fear, that simply is. And in that touch, something shifts. You realize that you have been living on the surface, reacting to shadows when the substance was always within you. You realize that your true nature is not the anxious self that worries, checks, and measures. Your true nature is the calm awareness behind all of that, the witness, the one who can choose states, the one who can enter the end, the one who can revise the past, the one who can speak, "It is finished," and rest. That one is the I am, and the more you live from it, the more your life begins to carry a quiet majesty. Not pride, not superiority, but dignity. Because you no longer feel like a victim of events. You no longer feel like a beggar in a hostile world. You begin to feel like one who belongs, like one who is at home in the universe. Because you have touched the source. Now this is the true elevation. That first you wanted the impossible to manifest. Then you discover something greater. The impossible was only a name for your old state. The real transformation is that you have changed. You have moved from fear to faith, from strain to rest, from begging to assuming, from worshipping the outer to honoring the inner. And in that movement, you begin to know yourself differently. You begin to know that when you say, "I am," you are not speaking lightly. You are speaking the name of God. And what you join to that name becomes your world. So you begin to join it to higher things. Not only wealth, but wisdom. Not only freedom from debt, but freedom from fear. Not only comfort, but compassion. Not only receiving, but giving. Because you see that all are yourself. You see that to bless another is to bless yourself. You see that the world is not a battlefield, but a mirror. And the mirror is softened by love. Now do not be troubled if this feels distant to you. The promise ripens in its own season. You are not asked to force spiritual experience. You are only asked to live the law faithfully. Use it. Prove it. Relax and allow. And as you do, a deeper knowing begins to dawn, quietly, like morning light. You begin to feel that you are not merely changing your life. You are awakening to yourself. You are discovering the I am. And that is the real prize. Because once you know the I am, you can never again feel truly helpless. Once you know the I am, you can never again be fully deceived by appearances. Once you know the I am, you can walk through the world with a peace that does not depend on conditions. You still live in the world of Caesar. Yes, you still pay bills, you still attend to daily affairs, but inwardly you have found the kingdom. And the kingdom is within you. Now we are coming to the final closing, the gentle sealing that will carry you into sleep. And in that closing, I will bring you back to the simplest truth, not as doctrine, as a lullaby for the soul, a whisper you can take with you into the night, so that you sleep, not as one hoping, but as one who knows. Let me draw these threads together now, not as a cold accounting, not as a lecture that ends with a tidy list, but as a feeling you can carry with you into the night. Because what matters is not that you remember my words. What matters is that you enter the state. And if you can enter it, even softly, even imperfectly, the law will do the rest. You have heard me speak of relaxing, but not the shallow relaxation of escape. Not the kind that forgets. Not the kind that collapses. I mean the true relaxation. The one that comes when you stop wrestling with shadows and you stand in inner authority. The relaxation that says, without shouting, "I know." The relaxation that comes when you cease begging and begin being. That kind of relaxation is power. It is the quiet strength of one who has already received. And you have heard me speak of allowing. Allowing is not waiting. Allowing is not passivity. Allowing is assuming the end as present. It is living from the accomplished fact. It is accepting inwardly that your desire is already yours in consciousness. And when you accept it, the body naturally softens. The mind naturally quiets. The heart naturally rests. That ease is not weakness. It is the sign of possession. It is the inward proof that you have moved from not yet into already. And when you do this, you have entered what Scripture calls the Sabbath. The Sabbath is not a day on the calendar. It is a state. It is the seal. It is the sacred stillness that follows a true imaginal act. The Sabbath is the moment you stop trying to make it happen, because you know it has happened within. It is the inner rest that says, it is finished. And that rest is not empty. It is full. It is full of certainty. It is full of quiet expectancy without strain. It is the soil in which your seed grows undisturbed. Now I have also spoken of that gentle doorway, the state akin to sleep, that twilight place where the senses fade, and the subconscious opens like fertile ground. You do not have to force your way into it. Night brings it to you as a gift. You simply cooperate with the gift. You lie down. You let the body grow heavy. You let the breath become slow. And you take one short scene, one simple moment that implies the end is already true. Not a long drama, not a complicated story, just a small act that carries the whole fulfillment within it. And you bring it to life with feeling, not by repetition like a parrot, but by sensation, by reality, by relief, by gratitude, by calm. And if you can fall asleep in that feeling, you have entered the doorway. You have planted the seed at the perfect hour. Now, if there has been something in you that keeps you tense, something old that keeps calling you back, you have heard me speak of revision. Revision is not punishment for the past. It is mercy. It is the act of loosening the anchor. It is refusing to let an old scene remain alive as your identity, because you cannot truly allow the new, while you still hold the old as who I am. You cannot rest in victory while you keep rehearsing defeat. So revision is the gentle freeing of the heart. It is the inward rewriting of what hurt you, until the sting dissolves and the state changes. And when the state changes, life changes. Then allowing becomes easier, because you are no longer dragging yesterday into tomorrow. And through the day, you protect what you have planted, not with anxious vigilance, not with frantic checking, but with a simple, quiet mental diet. You watch your inner words. You do not return to declaring impossibility. You do not return to speaking like a beggar. You do not keep renewing the old contract with fear. You become aware. You catch yourself. And when the old phrase rises, it won't work. It's too late. It's impossible. You stop it gently and replace it, not with strain, but with truth. All is well. It is finished. I am. And you feel the calm that belongs to those words, not as a trick, as a return to the state. Because every time you return to the state, you nourish it. Every time you refuse to contradict it, you protect it. Every time you rest instead of check, you allow it. Now I want you to feel the simplicity of what I have been saying all along. You are not trying to make the world change. You are changing the one thing that causes the world. You are changing the state, and the world cannot do anything but follow. You do not need to know the how. You do not need to choose the channel. You do not need to strain to build the bridge. Your only task is the end. Your only task is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Your only task is to relax into the naturalness of already having, and then to let life move, to let the bridge of incidents form, to let the law fulfill itself. Now, if you have listened this long, you are already nearer than you think, because the mere hearing of these truths begins to soften something in you, and softness is the beginning of allowing. So take this softness into your sleep. Do not turn it into effort. Do not try to remember every phrase. Just take the feeling that the burden can be lifted, the feeling that the impossible is only an old habit of the mirror, the feeling that the end is already present in consciousness, the feeling that it is done. Now in the final moments, I will give you the closing whisper, the gentle seal you can carry into sleep, so that the last impression upon your subconscious is not longing, not struggle, not waiting, but fulfillment. If you have come with me this far, if you are still here listening as the night deepens and the mind begins to soften, then you must know something about yourself. You are not like most. Most men and women hear a thing like this and they turn away quickly, not because it is false, but because it demands a change within. They would rather keep the familiar burden than step into a new identity. They would rather complain than assume. They would rather watch the mirror than change the face. But you stayed. And that staying is not a small thing. It means there is in you a hunger for the deeper truth, not for entertainment, not for idle comfort, but for the secret that sets one free. So let me offer you a blessing, as one speaks to another who has found a hidden door. If you have listened to this point, you have already separated yourself from the crowd that lives by habit. You have already shown that you can sit with an idea long enough for it to enter you. And when an idea truly enters you, it becomes a state. And when it becomes a state, it becomes your world. There are always a few in every generation who are willing to hear this law, not merely as words, but as a call to awaken, a call to take responsibility for the inner life, a call to stop giving power to the outside and to claim the power that has always been within. And those few are quiet. They do not need to announce themselves. They do not need to argue. They simply live differently. They move differently. They speak differently. They sleep differently. They plant differently. And because they do, life begins to treat them differently. Now, I do not say this to make you proud. Pride is another form of strain. I say it to give you recognition, because it matters that you know what kind of listener you are. You are the kind who can be transformed by hearing. You are the kind who can take a simple whisper and make it a new world. You are the kind who can relax into the end when others are still wrestling with shadows. You are among the few who are willing to remember, and that remembrance is the beginning of everything. You see, the world is full of people who want a different life, but very few are willing to become different within. They want the harvest without the seed. They want the fruit without the state. They want the fruit without the state. They want the miracle without the Sabbath. But you have listened to the rhythm. You have heard the quiet power of relaxation. You have heard the meaning of allowing. You have heard that the subconscious answers feeling, not noise. You have heard that the impossible is only a habit of the mirror, and something in you has begun to nod, not with the head, but with the heart. That nod is faith. It is the small, silent yes that opens the door. So I bless that yes in you. I bless your willingness to stop fighting and to begin resting. I bless your courage to assume what the senses deny. I bless your gentle persistence. I bless your capacity to let the old story die. I bless the new state that is being born in you even now, as you listen. And I tell you this, you do not need to become perfect overnight. You do not need to force yourself. You only need to keep returning to the end. You only need to keep choosing the feeling of completion. You only need to keep planting the right seed at night and protecting it in the day. That is enough. The Lord does not ask you for greatness. It asks you for faithfulness. And faithfulness is simply remaining loyal to the unseen reality until it becomes seen. So if you have stayed until this point, I acknowledge you, not as a stranger, but as one who recognizes the same hunger in another. You are part of the quiet company of those who dare to test the law, those who dare to live from within, those who dare to believe that imagination is not fantasy, but God. And when you begin to live this way, you will discover something that will make you smile. The world will begin to call you fortunate. It will call you lucky. It will call you blessed, but you will know what it really is. It is not luck, it is law. It is the natural outpicturing of a new state. And the greatest blessing of all is not that the world changes. It is that you have changed, that you are no longer a victim of appearances, that you are no longer a servant of anxiety, that you have learned to relax and allow, that you have begun to live as the one who already has. Now, as the night carries you closer to sleep, I will offer you the final whisper, a simple seal, a gentle phrase to carry across the threshold. And if you take it into sleep with feeling, you will wake one day and realize that the old life truly ended, not with drama, not with struggle, but with a quiet, sovereign surrender. Now let us make this final portion a quiet mission for the night. not a burden, not a task to strain over, a small sacred ritual, so gentle that you can do it half asleep, and yet so precise that it will plant the end like a seed in fertile ground. If you are listening while lying in bed, let the body begin to loosen. Do not try to loosen it. Simply notice where you are holding. The jaw, the shoulders, the belly, say why. And as you notice, let each place soften as though you have been given permission to stop, because you have. You are not here to wrestle life. You are here to allow life to mirror the state you choose. Now choose one micro scene, not a long story, not a complicated picture. One small moment that would be true if your desire were already fulfilled. Make it so simple that the mind cannot argue with it. It might be the feeling of putting your head on the pillow with the unmistakable relief of nothing to solve. It might be the sensation of waking tomorrow and smiling, not because you hope, but because you know. It might be hearing a single sentence from someone you love. Soft, ordinary, certain. It all worked out. Or it may be the quiet act of looking at a letter, a notice, a bill, and seeing it resolved. No drama, just the calm finality of completion. Do not try to make it vivid like a performance. Let it be intimate. Let it be close. Let it be felt more than seen. Now bring that micro scene near, as though it is happening now, as though you are inside it, and let it carry one feeling. Not excitement, not strain. The feeling you are aiming for is relief, peace, naturalness. The feeling of a thing already done. The feeling of a door already closed on the old life. Now, as that feeling begins to rise, I want you to add a seal, a phrase so simple that it cannot become complicated, but it must be spoken from the state, not from the mouth alone. So I give you this as your command, adapted to relaxation, adapted to allowing. I relax and I allow. It is done. Say it inwardly, as a whisper, not repeated like a parrot, not chanted with nervousness. One time, slowly, as though you are stating an accomplished fact. I relax and I allow. It is done. And as you whisper it, let your body respond. Let the shoulders sink, let the hands unclench, let the breath go lower, let the face soften. Because your body is the honest witness of your state. If the body relaxes, the mind begins to accept. And if the mind accepts, the subconscious receives. And if the subconscious receives, the world must reflect. Now repeat the micro scene just enough that the feeling becomes ordinary. Not forced, ordinary. The way it feels ordinary to know your name. The way it feels ordinary to know the bed is beneath you. Let the relief become so normal that you stop working at it. And if sleep comes while you are in that feeling, let it come. That is not failure. That is victory. Because the last impression is the seed, and the seed planted at the border of sleep is the seed that grows. Now there is one more thing I want you to do tonight. Not with effort, but with kindness. If any scene from the day tries to rise, an argument, a worry, a moment of shame, do not wrestle it. Do not push it away angrily. Simply revise it softly, as though you are turning a page. Hear the kinder words. See the softer outcome. Feel the peace where once you felt tension, and then return to your micro scene. Return to your seal. I relax and I allow. It is done. Now once you have whispered the seal and felt the relief, do not keep checking. Do not keep asking, did I do it right? That question is the old life trying to return. The new life does not ask. The new life rests. So if the question arises, answer it with gentleness. All is well. And let that be the end of the matter. Now I will tell you something that will feel mysterious until you have proven it for yourself. The impossible does not become possible through effort. It becomes inevitable through acceptance. A thing resists you when you clutch it, but it moves toward you when you release the strain. Not because you gave up, but because you finally stopped confessing absence. You stopped saying with your body and your mind, I do not have it yet. And you began to live, even for a few minutes, as the one who has. That is allowing. And allowing is the secret form of living in the end. So take this into the night, not as a heavy assignment, as a gentle doorway, a whisper, a micro-scene, a feeling of relief, a seal of completion. I relax, and I allow. It is done. And as you drift, you may not notice anything dramatic. That is the point. The law does not always announce itself with trumpets. It moves in silence. It rearranges in secret. It builds the bridge while you sleep. And then, in the days that follow, you will begin to notice the strangest thing. The world will start to behave as though your assumption were true. People will soften. Doors will open. Delays will resolve. Opportunities will appear where you did not plan them. And what you once called impossible will begin to feel, almost embarrassingly, natural. You will be surprised at how quickly the impossible becomes inevitable when you finally stop squeezing it. So now, beloved, let the night do its work. Let the body rest. Let the mind soften. Let the whisper be the last word. And let sleep take you not into forgetting, but into creation.